Get things started. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is John Meredith. I am a Sumo employee. I am based out of my home in Bedford, New Hampshire. So I'm on the U.S. East Coast, about an hour to an hour and a half north of Boston, depending on where in Boston you're coming from. And that does not include traffic. You add traffic, well, we can talk hours. But I'm teaching to you from my home office here. And this is what happens when the kids grow up and leave the house. You can actually reclaim their spaces as your office. So the only ask of you all is that if you have questions, please feel free to ask your questions. Okay. I have found, having taught for a number of years, that when you ask your questions, three groups of people benefit. Number one, hopefully you get the answer to your question. So there you go. There's one. Two, you also help the instructor, whoever he or she is. You help us calibrate on what's important to you. And that's really what this is all about. It's not about what I think is important. It's about what you think is important. So your questions help us, and we thank you for that. So that's number two. And then number three is that everybody else in the room hears your question. And a lot of people hear a question and they think, oh, I got a question related to that. And so before you know it, we've covered things in a very real and interactive way, rather than me just doing the lovely death by labs and PowerPoints. And so I would encourage you to ask your questions. And again, yesterday, the group did an outstanding job of asking lots of questions. So I would encourage that also for today. If you've got questions, like I said, let us know. We'll gladly try to take care of it. Other than that, I am going to stop my video sharing. And I am going to, like I said, to make one more pass here to make sure everybody's microphones are enabled, because we had a whole bunch of folks join. We are up to about 47 folks, and we'll get this party started. So just want to welcome you all to class. Just trying to make sure I enable all these lovely microphones here so you guys can ask your questions or make your comments directly. Okay. Okay. No, Thomas, that won't change anything. Thomas asked a question. He managed to make it to the 4 p.m. training, 4 p.m. Pacific time training. Would that change anything on my end? No, not at all. Nope. So we're good. Thank you for asking. So for those of you who do not know, we are doing 2 training classes a day. I am teaching the morning sessions here, if you will call them that. And then I'm on the East Coast, and then my boss on the West Coast, Josh Brotheim, is teaching the afternoon or evening classes, depending on where you are in the world. And they're 4 p.m. Pacific time or 7 p.m. East Coast time. And so we're teaching this class twice. And then tomorrow we'll do the same thing with the administration class. So just to give you a heads up. And then next month, we'll take a week in that month. I forgot which week we do. I'll look it up. And I think we're doing some security classes. So we're doing security analytics, and we're doing cloud SIM fundamentals and cloud SIM admin. So we'll have a week of security. And then the following month, we're going to have a week of DevOps type stuff or observability. So just want to give you an idea. Okay. Is there any way to access the recording yesterday? Yeah, let me show you how you can access a recording. Okay, so let me be even easier for you, Marco. Good question. Let me show you that, and let me show that to the rest of the class. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to the Sumo Search Mastery class. Again, yesterday we taught the fundamentals class, and I'll keep that question open for right now. RK wants the link to get to the certification exam for yesterday. So let me get going here, folks. So again, our game plan you're going to find for the most part is we're going to log in almost immediately into the training environment. We're going to start playing. So we're going to do this class not so much by PowerPoint, by slides, but rather by labs. And so we're going to focus on this. We're going to talk about searching and parsing. Mentioned those field extraction rules yesterday. We'll talk a little bit more about them. We'll talk about, filtering and conditional operations. We'll talk about some of the advanced functions we have. Again, some of you were really impressed yesterday with log reduce and log compare. We'll see those. We'll do the outlier function. We'll create some maps and spatial data. And then we'll also talk about creating alert, and I'll go into a bit more detail here with regards to creating alert. And then, of course, the last hour will be dedicated to you all taking the certification exam. I would anticipate taking a break in about an hour from now. So probably about 7 minutes or so after the hour is probably when we will take a break and get things going. Yesterday, many of you discovered, yesterday we mentioned to you that if you take the exam, the certification exam right after class, or right when we offer it, during that hour, and you pass it, you can email training@sumologic.com a copy of your certificate with your email address, and we will send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. So it's our way of encouraging you to take the exam and get certified. You may ask why. We have found that people get certified, they are more apt to use the product, and they are more apt to use it more effectively and learn and continue to learn. So we are running a promotion right now where if you immediately, take the exam right when during the class, as part of the class, and again, we'll give you that last hour to do that, and you pass it, you guys can send us that information and we'll send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. Many of you did this yesterday. I know I saw a lot of emails, and I expect you all to take advantage of it today. So just wanted you to be aware of that promotion.
So even if we've already gotten that voucher, we can get a second one if we take this one as well.
I'm sorry?
So we can get 2 vouchers if we already took the yesterday's.
If you did it yesterday and do it today, you can get 2 vouchers. That's correct. And if you stick around and do tomorrow's admin class, you can get 3. So we're going to be running this till the end of the year, I think.
All right, nice.
Yep. Everybody likes something, some good stuff here. Okay. Yep. So can we get a second voucher? We submitted the one yesterday for yesterday's course. You can get a second voucher when you complete this exam, Megan. Sounds like you got one from yesterday. And yes, you can do the same process for today. Send an email to training@sumologic.com with a copy of this certificate from today's class. And yes, you can get another voucher. So I hope that answers your question, Megan. All right. So yesterday we talked about what Sumo Logic is, right? And how we can look across operationally our environments to make sure that they're up and they're running. We can talk about security, where our users are logging in from. We can even look at, for example, if a user is logging in, are they logging in from 2 different areas in a relatively short period of time? For example, if I log in from Bedford, New Hampshire, and then 2 hours later, I log in from, say, Redwood City, California, where our headquarters is, hopefully within 2 hours, hopefully little alarm bells go off in your head saying, because we don't have transporter technology, you can't really do that. And so therefore, maybe somebody's impersonating John and trying to log in with him or something you got to check into. Now, is it possible that I VPN'd in and that directed me? Yes, it is. But it's something you probably want to look into, excuse me. And so the point is that we can do this with our security information here. We call that, by the way, a land speed violation, right? Also, you can look at your business intelligence to see how things are going. And then, of course, at a very high level, we can look at operational intelligence, security intelligence, and business intelligence throughout the world, if you will. So if guard duty tells us there's an attack going on, we might be able to get an indication of who's being affected and things like that at a very high level. Again, your data comes from a wide variety of things, whether you're on the cloud or whether you're on-prem, doesn't make any difference to us. As long as you have log data, we'd love to ingest it, and we'd love to be able to tell you information about it, let you find out information about it. Again, Sumo Logic was born in the cloud, raised in the cloud. We are run on AWS. We scale up for you automatically. We take care of all that stuff for you, so you don't have to worry about it. We have a bunch of machine learning that you'll talk about today and advanced analytics that we'll talk about today. Some neat functions that you'll see. Some of it you saw yesterday. And we also have a bunch of APIs, application programming interfaces. For those of you who want to do things programmatically, like create users, create collectors, things like that, you can do that through our APIs. Okay. You can also schedule reports, create alerts. We've got APIs for a lot of different things. And those APIs are in our documentation, and we'll talk about that documentation here in just a few minutes. And then most importantly, here's all the various certifications that we have achieved with regards to ensuring that your data is safe, secure, and compliant. Like I said, about 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago now, we received our FedRAMP moderate authorization. So we are now FedRAMP certified for those of you who play with the US government. Good to know. And we talked yesterday and talked today, if you will, that there's 3 phases to using Sumo logic. The first phase is getting data into Sumo, right? So that comes in through either collectors or sources. If you're on the cloud, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, doesn't make any difference. Those collectors are hosted by us. You don't have to worry about those collectors at all. And then what the collectors do is they're going to encrypt the data, compress it, and send it to Sumo. Now, if you have a bunch of on-prem systems, you can install the collectors. And these collectors are little lightweight Java-based applications that, again, compress, encrypt, and send. They take about 1% or less than 1% of your CPU and less than 1% of your total memory. So I wouldn't worry, they're not going to be heavy footprint type things. Now, these collectors are going to, again, encrypt, compress, and send. What do they compress and send? Well, your source data, your logs that you want. What logs do you want? Do you want your web server logs? Do you want your S3 bucket logs if you're on AWS? Do you want, what data do you want to bring into and ingest into Sumo Logic? That's what your sources are. By the way, not only can we bring in source data, but we can also bring in metric data as well. We can also bring in open telemetry and transactional data, something we haven't talked too much about in the yesterday or today. But in our observability session, you'll see that we'll get into that. Once we get data coming into Sumo, then we can focus on searching and analyzing. And that's really going to be the focus of today. We are going to focus on searching and analyzing using a bunch of operators, and I'll show you where you can get information about those operators. We're going to build some visualizations, some charts. And then from that, we can also then build some dashboards and build some alerts. So items 2 and 3 are really going to be the focus of today's conversation. Keep in mind that we're not going to talk too much about dashboards, but I will show you a little bit about dashboards just to keep things interesting. We have metadata tags that we use, as those of you with me yesterday know. These metadata tags, all of our tags that we use typically are referenced by an underscore. For us, a reserved word starts with an underscore. And so when you create a collector, for example, we can reference it by underscore collector equals, and then the name of that collector. We create a source, we can reference it by underscore source equals, and the name of that source. This source category is bolded because you can use this source category and you can freely configure it when you create a source. So you can organize your sources. So for example, you might have a prod environment, a dev environment, a UAT environment. And so it might start with prod or dev or UAT. Then you might put a slash in there. And then within your prod, dev, or UAT, what subassembly is this source category from? Maybe it's your authentication servers, maybe it's your emails, whatever. Then slash, and then the type of logs, your access logs, your security logs, your whatever logs. And so you can put slashes in this source category to kind of break things down. And that's typically the one that we use. In fact, you'll see a test question that we recommend that you use source category of other of these metadata tags to do a lot of your searching and things along those lines. Now, what I'd like you all to do is I'd like you all to log into the training environment. And to log into the training environment, there's a couple things we need to do. First of all, I'd like you to fire up Google Chrome or Firefox. And I'd like you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. I happen to have Google Chrome fired up. I am going to type in service.sumologic.com, and it's going to ask me to log in here. Now, before you figure out an email, let's do this. I'd like you all to grab a 3-digit number. I don't care what the 3-digit number is, but I'd like you to type it in the chat box. Those of you with me yesterday, feel free to use the same number. Okay, so pick a 3-digit number, any 3-digit number that you like. I don't care. And again, I see this stuff is coming to the chat box. Thank you very much. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to minimize duplication. So, and then what you're going to do is you're going to log in as training plus analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. So the email is going to be training plus analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the password just got changed Monday. It changes every month. So we just changed it for November. And the password is thanks maybe in honor of Thanksgiving, but or thank you, 2-1 exclamation mark. And so with a valid email and a valid password, you should be able to click on that login button and it should in fact log in. Okay. Now I'm not going to use this number. So if somebody really wants 017, they can have it. I'm actually going to log in with my account. So I actually, as being a trainer here, I have a real account that with my name and everything in it, but that I can use. So my goal here is to get you all logged in. What I'd like you to do is once you get logged in, I'd like you to go ahead and raise your hand. And I see I've got a bunch of folks here who joined us here. Let me make sure you guys can all talk. Oops. So get you all, that way you can ask your questions and all that fun stuff. All right, looks like everybody's unable to talk. So 42 out of 58 right now say they are all logged in and they're good to go. Okay, if you're having problems logging in, please let me know. Okay, that's really the big part of this. So if you're having problems logging in, let me know. But hopefully you're all logged in. I realize that some of you may have gotten tapped on the shoulder from work issues and stuff like that. So I'm not expecting 100% participation here, but I am expecting probably about what I've got, which is about 80–90%. So looks like we're in pretty good shape. So again, I want you to log in, and again, logging in, you're going to log in. Hang on a second here. Let me take this lovely information one more time. There we go. You're going to go fire up Google Chrome or Firefox. You're going to go to service.sumologic.com. You're going to pick a 3-digit number. And I don't care if it's anywhere from 001 to 999, somewhere in between there. If you would type it in the chat box, that would be wonderful. And you're going to log in as Training Plus Analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. So when you get to, here, you'll log in as Training Plus Analyst, and helps by actually replace this admin with Analyst. And again, the password is capital T, HANKS, numeral 2, numeral 1, exclamation mark. Okay, if there's a dupe, yeah, that's fine. If 2 of you have the same number, it's not a big deal. Yep. What I'm just trying to avoid is that 100 of you don't have the same number. So, all right. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to log in. And so let's go ahead and have ourselves some fun. I'm going to go ahead and lower all the hands. So hands are down. And let's talk about getting in here, and let's talk about what we can see. Again, I'm going to log in with my account to free up a number. And so here we are logged into Sumo Logic. Okay. Okay. Hang on, Vera. I'll answer your question in just a little bit. Okay. So here we are logged into Sumo Logic. Over here on the left is my navigation panel. If your navigation panel is not open, I just closed mine up. You want to open it, you can click anywhere where it says Sumo Logic, or you can click on this hamburger menu. So and that will open it up. To close it up, you click on the left turn signal. Here is where we can access shared library information. We can access personal stuff. And for those of you in class yesterday, you learned that if we put it in our personal folder, we can still share it with others, which is really kind of cool. One thing I didn't mention to you yesterday is that you can also export and import these objects. And so you can actually export and import from one environment to another if you want to. Okay, that's probably something more your administrator is going to do, not you all, but just want you to be aware of it. Here is my favorites. I can mark something as a favorite by simply, if I put my cursor over it, I see there's a hollow star. If I click on that star to fill it in, it is now part of my favorites. There it is. I don't want it to be a favorite anymore. I click on the star again, hollow it back out, and it's no longer a favorite. Over here, I can look at recently opened by me or recently shared with me. So I can see recent things I've opened, or recent things that have been shared with me. So kind of handy and easy to get around. Below this is our main menu. In our main menu, I'm going to start like I did yesterday with help. So if you would click on help, and under help, click on community. So if we go to community and we search for the word slides, 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 you'll get this link right here. And this link, it says training and certification lab, webinar, and slides. This is a page that provides for all of our courses, a link to our labs, a link to a recording of the class, and a link to our slides. Now, actually, we're in this class. So here's our search mastery class that we're taking, and here's a link to our labs. Here's a link to a recording of this class, and here's a link to our slides. Up here is a link to the recording of our class that we had yesterday, okay? Now, that's probably not yesterday's class session, but it was probably done. It's probably been done in the last month or so. Still probably fairly fresh. So this is where you can find and get links to previous classes. So Marco, I hope that answers your question. You wanted to know how to get a hold of a recording. And you can get a hold of a recording of any of our classes. Not necessarily the ones in the past. You can get ones, you can get a link to our new observability fundamentals class if you want, our observability administration class, all of that fun stuff. All right. We now have 10 certification courses. We introduced 4 during our Illuminate event a month and a half ago. All right. By the way, I'm going to take this URL and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it here in chat. So you guys have access to that link. If you want to bookmark it, you're welcome to. By the way, you can also access all this information from your Sumo Logic environment. So when you log into your Sumo Logic environment, you can open up help. You can click on community, takes you to the same community. And by the way, that community is where we, Sumo Logic, our customers and our partners all collaborate on things, right? You want to talk about product enhancements in that ideas area, in the community area, there's a place for ideas. And we can see what enhancements people have requested and vote on them. You want to look for some code examples, right? Somebody wants to look for maybe some geolocation examples or whatever. I'm just guessing here, bear with me. So here's information from our knowledge base. Here's stuff from our community, right? Geolocation based on IP and all that fun stuff. How to identify and filter for a private IP address. All kinds of different examples here that you can search for. And I would encourage you to take advantage of the community. Now, speaking of taking advantage of that community, I'm going to go back to my slides here, if you don't mind. And I'm going to go back to this link. And I'm going to go here where it says Search Mastery. I'm going to click on the labs. And that's going to open a tab for me that takes me to our Search Mastery labs. And these, ladies and gentlemen, are the 13 labs that we're going to do over the next hour and a half. Okay. Okay. Ronald asked a question, is there a place that stores our previous JAM certs? I assume, Ronald, you're asking about your certifications. Is that correct? The certs you've taken? Okay, good. And actually, that question came in also just a minute or two ago from Vera. So how long does it take to get a certification like from yesterday? Okay. So let me answer that question for you all, and let me take care of that question. Additionally, there's another question here related to, can I send you a link to the fundamental certification exam? Okay. So the problem is right now in Sumo Logic, you are all logged in as Training Plus Analyst. Okay. So you're not logged in with your name. I'm logged in with my name, but you're not. So what you need to do is you need to log out of here and you need to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment so that you're logged in with your name. Then once you're logged in with your name, then you can click on the home tab, this home tab right here. Click on this certification tab and click on this Get Certified button. Now, and once you go into the Get Certified button, Up here in the right-hand corner is your profile. Now I put my picture there. You can add your picture if you want to. But here, ladies and gentlemen, is where your certs are. So if you take a cert and you pass a cert, here is where you will see them. Here is where you can view your certifications. Print them out, put them on your I Love Me wall, whatever you want to do. Let me do something here real quick and save myself some space. Let me pin down some tabs here. Okay. So I want to go back to here. Also, you can add this to your LinkedIn profile. So Vera, hopefully this answers your question about where can I see my certs? We don't mail you your certifications. Your certifications are here and you can pull them down anytime you want, but they're part of your profile. Okay. Additionally, this is how you get to the exams. So let me forget the profile for a second. Let me close out of here and hit done. This is where our exams are. So for those of you who wanted to take the fundamentals exam yesterday and didn't, here you can click on fundamentals and here's the exam in English or the exam in Japanese or the exam in Spanish. So you can go in here and take the exam. This is where the exams are. So hopefully that answers RK's question, how to get to those exams. Okay. Gina asked a question, could this be used as a CFE? I assume we're talking about credits for continuous learning and all that stuff. I assume that's what you're asking, Jenna. Right now, we have not set our certifications up, continuous education units up for that. We are considering it because that question does come up quite a bit. And we've got to get the courses and stuff evaluated for how many credits and stuff they work. But right now, Gina, today, the answer to that question is no, I'm sorry. But it is something I know we're interested in and working on. By the way, Gina, if you have strong feelings on that, or if any of you will have strong feelings on that, I would encourage you to feel free to send an email to training@sumologic.com. That email address goes to all of us in the training team, including my boss and my boss's boss. And so we love to hear from customers on things like that because your vote counts, your voice is heard. So I would encourage you, like I said, and same thing with these certifications and stuff. As you know, when you do the Uber Eats thing, you send an email to training@sumologic.com. And I can tell you, I've gone through probably between the two classes yesterday, easily over 120 emails about people wanting the Uber Eats certificates. So that's fine. That's fine. Glad to give it to you. And so hopefully that answers our questions here. Let me go ahead and clean up the Q&A box here. Any other questions about certification? And for those of you with me, I will review how to get to the certification exam and stuff later. So I'll walk you through this, those of you who didn't take the certification exam yesterday, because when you click on this button, it may not take you here. And so I'll walk you through the issue to get around that. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you again, I'm going to go back here to my Sumo Logic environment. I'm going to go back to help. This time I'm going to click on documentation. And here in documentation, just a couple things I want to point out. In this, these are chapters. So my start here chapter, my send data chapter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to learn about metrics. There's the chapter for you. You want to deal with transactional tracing? There you go. You want to learn about APIs? As you can see, we have a few APIs and so forth and so on. One thing I do want to point out to you here in the Start Here chapter, you'll see there's a little link down here for Quick Start Labs and Tutorials. And if I click on this Quick Start Labs and Tutorials, here are all the labs for all of our courses. So if you want to just actually work through the labs yourself, listen to a recording, take the exam, you can do that. You certainly can do that. All of our exams are free. All of our courses are free. We want to make it easy for you to be successful. But I'm also going to go back here and click on my hands-on labs for Search Mastery. And again, I'm going to take this URL. I am going to copy it. And I am going to put it into the chat box. So you all have it. And I'm also going to take this and I'm going to pin it. I happen to be running Google Chrome, so I can right click on the tab and I can pin it to kind of get it out of my way and lock it down. So now I can switch back and forth between my labs and my Sumo Logic environment. Makes it fairly easy. All right. By the way, one thing about our certification exams, they are open note, open book, open documentation, and you can even ask the instructor a question if you get stuck. So feel free to ask me questions while we're taking the exam this afternoon, or an hour and a half. And or also feel free to look at the slides. That's why I gave you that link to the community, where you can download the slides if you want to. But basically, and of course, you can also file up and look in the documentation. So that takes care of all of that. Let us start then with lab number 1 here. Are there any questions before we start getting into the labs? Any questions? All right. So the first couple of labs, I'm going to warn you, have a lot of parts to them, have like 10 steps and stuff to them. So they're a little bit long and laborious. Once we get past lab 3, we start getting lab 4 and 5. They're very focused, very specific. So getting for those first couple are kind of tough. Okay. Tom says, I'm not able to get the pencil to show. Missing the whole legacy thing. I'm not sure what you mean by pencil here, Tom. What are you trying to click on here, sir? What page are you?
Sorry, from yesterday, you had pointed out a pencil icon.
Oh,
show up.
Gotcha. Wow, that's okay. I know what we're talking about. We're talking about dashboards. Okay. Okay. I'll tell you what. Let me take care of it. If I take a query and I want to build the dashboard out of that query, so just bear with me a second. This is really more for answering Tom's question. Okay. Which is a little obscure, but we'll take care of it here. If I create a query here, don't worry about this query so much. As far as what this query is doing, we're going to see lots of queries here. And we're going to do a count. All right. So I have here a count by status code. And if I want to, I can turn this into, say, a pie chart or a donut chart, so I can see the percentage of codes and all that fun stuff. And then I can add this to a dashboard. Now, the secret is, what kind of dashboard are you going to use? Are you going to use a legacy dashboard, or are you going to use a new dashboard? So I'm going to give this panel a name. I'm going to call this maybe Apache status codes. And I'm going to give my dashboard a name, John JWM. I usually name everything with my initials. It makes it fairly easy. And I'm going to label this one for Tom. I put my cursor back in there. I want it to be a new name, so it creates a new dashboard. So one of the reasons, Tom, when you don't see the pencil is, by default, this wants to create this in this new dashboard interface. And you don't want to do that. So we have a new dashboard interface, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, or we have this legacy dashboard interface. And that's what we were talking about yesterday. So I'm going to click add, and I'm going to add this to my legacy dashboards. And there is my information, and I can build this up. When I am done editing this in the legacy dashboards, I click done editing. And this is where my pencil comes from. So if you're not in the legacy dashboards, you won't see the pencil. Additionally, if you haven't clicked done editing, you won't see this. Or if you switch this to live mode, you won't see the pencil either. So those are 3 reasons why you wouldn't see a pencil. Take it out of live mode, then you'll see the pencil, then you can click on it. So this is a conversation we had yesterday about creating these dashboards. So Tom, does that help you out? Okay, so I think we're good on that one. And then somebody else asked a question here. My company's Sumo Logic account, I can't get the autocomplete and hints in the search box to show. Is there any way to enable that? That should be enabled by default. I wonder if there's something going on with your group policies or something. I would actually just, Shakib, I would actually reach out to our tech support folks on that and ask them. So talk to your administrator first, but reach out to our tech support folks and see what's going on there. Okay. That should be working by default. All right. So we are all caught up with questions. I apologize for the little segue there, folks, but did want to make sure the question got answered. And so let's turn our attention here to the labs. So here we are, hands-on labs for search mastery. And we want to start with lab number 1. By the way, I mentioned that the password recently got changed here, and the password is now good for the month of November, meaning that you can go back and use this credentials, and you can log in here for the entire month of November, and you can do exercises and play and all that fun stuff. When December rolls around, and usually it's the first Monday of the month, but when December rolls around and we change the password, once we change the password, I will know what the password is. And if you want to know what the password is, you can send me an email, and I'm putting my email address in here right now, and I will share it with you. Okay. So there is my email information. I just put it in the chat box. So if when we get around to December and the password changes and you want to know what the new password is, let me know. Okay. We get into March or something of next year and you want to, ask the password, that's fine. Let us know. The one thing we ask is that you don't, and again, in this class and with your current credentials, you don't have the ability to bring in any of your data into our training environment. But some of the more advanced classes, we give you a different logon credential where you do have the ability to bring in data, any data into our training environment, create a collector, create sources. And all I ask is that you don't bring your customer data into our training environment, right? We want to keep your data protected and safe and secure. And I want to put on a public system where anybody can access. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. Anyway, let's talk about lab number 1. So here in lab number 1, we are going to start with a query. And we're going to start here with lab 1, step 1, and we're going to want to search all messages from a specific source. So I'm going to go into Sumo Logic. I want to grab a new log source. Now, when I click on this new button, or if I go on home and I click on log search, that's what's going to generate my log search. And many of you are probably thinking, okay, this is log search. Where do I learn about some of these? And log search, obviously we'll play with that today, ad nauseam. Metric, we will play within the metric mastery class. Most of these other things, in fact, about all of these other things, you will see us have long discussions in the observability training. So these are things that we've recently come up with, the ability to do open telemetry and transaction traces and spans and service maps, the ability to explore and use our root cause explore. These are all things that we've recently come out with over the last year, and we've added to our observability fundamentals class. So if you want to learn about those, you probably want to sign up for the observability class. And again, in some cases in your company, you may not have all these dropdowns. Depends on what your interests are and that sort of thing. However, that being said, let's click on new, let's click on log source. Now, we typically start with what data do we want to see, right? And so we might do something, I remember I mentioned earlier about source category. So I'm going to type in an underscore and I immediately see all the things I can use. Source category, source collector, all that fun stuff. I can click on source category or I can type it and it automatically puts in source category and an equal sign. And then I can start typing in the information that I want. Labs/Apache. And as I start typing here, regardless of case, it starts finding the source categories that I can use. And so I'm going to use labs/Apache/access. And then I can run this query. 2 ways I can run this query. I can click on this blue button over here to the right, and it will run my query. Or I can just hit the return key on my keyboard. The return key on my keyboard. Now, by default, when you create a query, if you don't specify a time, it's going to be 15 minutes. And this makes a great test question. So by default, if you don't specify a time, it's going to be 15 minutes. And then here I can see the number of results I have, the fact that this query is done running, how long it took, okay, my results, and then here's my session ID. And the only people who really want the session ID are, if you've got to talk to tech support, they may want to be able to see that information, okay? Down below here, I have all those 7,306 messages in my case. They're broken down in about 25 messages a page. Over here where my gear setting is, you can see I can export them if I want to. I can also change it to how many pages I want to see, or how many messages I want to see per page. Okay. And so that's that. Over here on the left is your field browser. And we'll talk a little bit more about the field browser in just a little bit. And I'll go into a bit more detail. So right now I'm looking at my Apache access logs, and I see I've got some information here, and I'm getting my log messages. These are off my Apache access logs. Okay. Now what I want to do is I only want to find those that have the number 404 in them somewhere. So right now I've got 7,306 messages. If I type in the word and I want to find any of those messages that have a 404 in them, and then I rerun this query, you'll see I'm down to 235 messages. Now, it's looking for any message that has a 404 anywhere in it. Doesn't have to be in the status code field. Those who are familiar with Apache logs may know this is the status code field. It could be anywhere in here, all right? And so what it's doing right now is it's finding those particular messages that have a 404 in them. So I can use this first line to scope and to just determine what I want to see, right? Maybe I'm only interested in seeing those messages that maybe have Safari from a Safari browser. So I could search for Safari. And again, I can see only the messages that have the word Safari in them somewhere. So you can filter right off the get-go, okay? Yep, Gabriel asked a good question. I was going to get to it, so let's get to it now. The and here, right? The and. Do I need to use the and? No, I don't. If I don't put something in there, I've got a space between my source category and my fields, it assumes an and. So ands are implied. Ors must be implicitly stated. Now, here I'm looking at my Apache access logs, or any log that has the word Safari in it. So right now I start with my Apache access logs. But if I jump down here to say the end, I have all kinds of other logs where it found the word Safari in it somewhere. So be careful here about your Boolean logic. And again, if you don't specify an operator, it assumes an and. Now somebody raised their hand. So hopefully, Gabriel, that answers your question. We're good to go. Somebody raised their hand. So if you got a question, please feel free to ask it.
I got a question. Is there any semantic difference if we add quotes around Safari?
No, there's none. So you don't have to put quotes around Safari. You could. The difference and the reason, the only time you need to put quotes around something is when there's a space in it.
Okay, cool.
So there's no difference as far as putting quotes in there. And again, it's double quotes. So if I want, Safari and then something else that's part of the text, then I do need to, it's got a space in it. I do need to put quotes in it.
Cool.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess it's not case sensitive at all in quotes unless.
That's correct. This first line is case insensitive.
Okay.
Which is what I was going to mention next. So thank you for the lead in. So yeah, this first line is totally case insensitive. I don't care if you type in uppercase, lowercase, it will automatically go ahead and resolve it. So this is step 1 and 2 here of lab 1. In step 3, again, they want us to use, we can use the and operator or not, but then we want to see and look for the word error, or the word starts with check. I don't care what it ends in. It could be checked in, checked out, checked whatever. And so for that, we use this global wildcard. So I could go into this line and I could say parenthesis error helps if I spell correctly, or CHEK with a global wildcard star, and then my end parentheses. So these two things are being ORed together, and then they're being ANDed with that. That's what the parentheses are doing. And so now I'm going to find only those logs that start with the word check or have the word error in them. And I'm down to 107 results. Now, obviously, the smaller the result set you get, the faster this query then can run from this point forward. So one of the things that we advocate, and you'll bear with me here a second while I find the slide, right? When you build your query, it typically comes into this sort of structure. We're going to add the metadata tag and any keywords we're looking for. And that's going to set kind of the top of a funnel, top of a funnel that when I go through the rest of these steps, it's going to drive stuff through the funnel. But this sets the diameter of that funnel. The more specific I can be here, the smaller the top of that diameter of that funnel becomes. Then I can parse things out. We typically parse, then we filter, then we aggregate, then we format. And you'll see as we go through these labs, that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay. Okay. Karen asked a question, why is Mozilla in double quotes? It does not have to be in double quotes. Okay. The only reason you need double quotes is when you have a word with a space in it. Then you need the double quotes. But it's trying to do a string match on that, is what the double quotes mean. I'm trying to match to a literal string. But we've made it so that you don't have to put the double quotes around there unless there's a space in the word. Okay. So then you do need to put the double quotes. So hopefully that clarifies things. Thank you very much, Karen, for asking. By the way, one other thing, let me mention this one to you here. Stop that. Here in my Sumo logic environment here, over here where my, here's where I write my query. Over here is my more action button, these three vertical dots. And the more action button exists in our product all over the place. But the point is, if I go to this more action button and I click on it, you'll see there's this link to cheat sheets. And when I click on cheat sheets, you'll see that it takes me into our documentation in an area called Cert cheat sheets. And here you can see that we've got some general example cheat sheets that you can use to kind of show you how to get around and the Boolean logic and all that stuff, how to parse and all that. We've also got a log operatives cheat sheet, which allows you to see the various operators and stuff that we use. And if you want, there's even a PDF version of this that you can click on and you can print. But I will go ahead and add this to the chat box for you, okay? Yep. Ron makes a good point here. And that is watch out for dashes in the text that you're searching for. Yeah, you want to be careful about the actual structure of the log message itself and what you're searching for. So point is well taken. We'll show you some examples of that as we go through this. All right, so we've done step 3 and we can see those results. Now, what we want to do here is we want to actually look at our error logs within Apache. So we want to look for the last 45 minutes. So I'm going to go back to my query here. I could create a new query if I want, or I could modify this query. It doesn't make much difference. I'm going to backspace over this. And if I get rid of access, I see there's error. So I'm going to grab error. And then to make it the last 45 minutes, if I go over here to my time, I can click on this and pull it down. Now, I can choose last 15 minutes, last 60 minutes, last 3 hours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's not a choice here for 45 minutes. Not a big deal, okay? Because if I click away for a second, I see there's the code right there, -15M, M for minutes. So if I go in here and I say -45M, that's 45 minutes. And if I look at my black tooltip here, it's showing me it's taking my current time and it's subtracting out 45 minutes. So you can, I can, we can type in and look for whatever we want, okay? If you want to go back to, again, your minutes, it's M, H for hours, D for days. Pretty simple. Also, additionally, you can go in here to custom and you can pick specific dates that you want. or you can type the dates in here that you want. So if you want to go from example 11/01/2021, by the way, if I don't specify a year, it assumes current year. And I can also put in a time here, but if I don't specify a time, it assumes midnight. So I can put in my date ranges if I want to that way. Now, one other thing I want to mention to you while we've got time. What is it using for this time? What is it basing this time on? It's basing the time on the timestamps of your logs. So when we define a source and we bring this data into Sumo Logic, we define where we're going to get that timestamp. And usually there's a timestamp in all of your logs, and that's what we use. We use that timestamp. And you can even specify whether you want to, use GMT on the timestamp, or you want to use local time or whatever, however you want to do that. But you'll find over here in this gear icon, there's two switches. Right now it says use receipt time, and that's the default time, receipt time. And I want to use the receipt time, the time that's in my stamp. If I throw this switch, this is log time, log message time. If I throw the switch to use receipt time, this is the time that we at Sumo have received the message. So now when I run this query and I go back 45 minutes, I'm not looking at the timestamp of the message. I'm looking at the timestamp that we at Sumo Logic received it. And so what I'll see here is I'll see the receipt time, and then I'll see the timestamp from the log. But we're looking back 45 minutes based on this. So if you got good timestamps, you're probably going to use those. If you don't have good timestamps, you might use receipt time. But you can also look at the difference between receipt time, and you can see it didn't take long for us to receive these messages, a couple of seconds at most. So we ingest data here fairly frequently. But that's what that little switch does, using receipt time. And again, if you put your little cursor over the eye, it proceeds to tell you what this is all about. I'll talk about the auto parse mode a little later.
Is the receipt time going to use your current time zone or the time zone where the servers are hosted?
The receipt time is going to use the time that we receive it. However, it's going to be everything's based on the same time zone. And let me be more precise. If I go into my navigation panel, and if you go into where your account is, and if you go into your preferences, here's when you search for things, what time zone do you want to use? What is your default time zone? So we set it up on the source end, but then when you run your queries, this is how you run it. And then what format do you want to use? So I'm trying to be a little more precise here in my answer and give you an idea of how this works. So you'll set up however your browser is set up, and then it will consistently use that time zone, regardless for receipt time or for message time or for whatever time.
Gotcha. So so when we upload our logs, right, we're going to be using like Unix time, which doesn't have a timestamp, right? It goes up when we just read it in the display. The log time is going to be adjust to our time zone, and the receipt time when we enable it is also adjusted to our time zone based on what we have set in the preferences. Correct.
Correct.
What you said, like that's
correct. But I want to put a caveat to that. Okay. Let's go into a log that we receive here. Bear with me a second. Let me at least grab one here. When you and I, that's a bad example.
Dealing with time zones like in my Sumo Logic and my New Relic and like across all these different places kind of is super crazy. I have
Well, you can get messy
to just like manage them.
Yeah, standardize. Hang on a second, folks. Let me interesting. I don't have a source in here. I usually do. There we go. Good. There's my source. There's my collector, but okay. I'll just do it from here. This is my collector, but still the same sort of thing applies. You decide what time zone you want to ingest things in. So on your collectors and your sources, you define how you want to deal with the time zone, and also what you want to use for your time information. Okay. It's actually in the source. So that's on the input side. And then when you're running queries, you go into your preferences and you decide how you want to display things. So yes, I can understand why having multitude of products, Sumo, Logic, New Relic, and other things, that's all different. They're all different environments. Of course, my advice to be standardize on Sumo and be done with the other products, but I realize that's easier said than done. But if you can get them all to use the same time zones, then your life becomes a bit more simpler, I hope.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I realize somebody raised their hand. So what's your question? Make sure it was enabled here. Somebody had their hand raised. So, Raceland, what's the question?
Sorry, I don't have a question.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Okay. Excellent. Again, if you have any questions, anybody has any questions, feel free to just ask them. All right, let me see if we can finish up lab number 1, then we'll take a break. So we looked here at our Apache error logs for the last 45 minutes, right? And we got this many results. Great. Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to look at my Apache error logs and or my Apache access logs. So I can do something like this. I can add an or clause, right? Source category equals labs/Apache/access. So I can look at this or that, right? 2 different sources. And so I can combine that. So here I've got 27,000 log messages here. And if I look at my source category down here, by the way, this is my field browser. My field browser shows me some built-in fields and also fields that come from a field extraction rule. So I'll get into it in a little bit, another lab. But here I can look at my source category, and if I click on it, I can see that approximately 79% is coming from my Apache access logs, while only about 20% is coming from my Apache error logs. And I can actually see the number breakdown. So you can put your cursor over any of these fields and you can get bits and pieces of information. Now, the trick is there's a limit of 10 values it can display. So if the number is greater than 10, it's only going to show me my top 10. It's greater than 10, it shows me my top 10. If it's less than 10, it shows me the various values themselves. But this is a very quick way of finding out where things are coming from, what source they're coming from, my Apache prod environment, what source name they're coming from, what source category they're coming from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of a handy way of getting around. And I'll talk a lot more about that. Now, Tim asked a very good question. He said, what if I change this from or to an and? And I was going to do that. So appreciate you asking. What do you think is going to happen, Tim? What do you think is going to happen? I'm going to get nothing because I don't have a message that's in my error log that's also in my access logs.
Okay.
So Boolean logic says I'm not going to get anything. And that's absolutely right.
That makes sense.
And this is
Thank
where, if you get some strange results, examine your query, examine what you're trying to do.
So if you wanted to filter, say, the Apache access log to include 404, or I'm sorry, the Apache error log to include 404, but not the access log, would you do end the Apache error and 404?
Yep.
How would you do that? Have still search for the Apache access, but also filter 404 on Apache error?
Okay. Put them in parentheses.
Okay,
Control the logic.
okay.
And again, for those of you who had computer programming classes in college that maybe it just drove you crazy, this is the sort of thing that, it's a nature of the beast. You got to control the logic and write the query in such a way that it logically makes sense. So I'm basically combining these two things first, and then I'm also doing an or against that.
Okay, makes sense.
Go ahead, Thomas. What's your question, sir?
Just a step back to the actual source category metadata label. Is that something you can define per user, or is that done on the administrative level for the whole system that everyone accesses?
Okay, that is defined actually by the source.
Gotcha.
So when we define and create a source, we give it a source category. And you can use that source category to organize things. Additionally, you can also, when you create a source, you can also add metadata tags. For example, maybe you want to put in a metadata tag called business unit. And this is who you charge this stuff off to. So maybe you want to charge it to your accounting department, your marketing department, your whatever department. And so you can filter and search by those metadata tags as well.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So, yep, thank you for asking. All right. Now, earlier I did step 5, and I'm going to show you another way to do step 5. Since both of these start with the word lab/Apache/whatever, again, I can use my wildcard. So if I replace all this with a wildcard, these are equivalent expressions. And somebody's going to ask, well, is one more efficient than the other? No, they're both about the same. They're both equally efficient. But this will give you the same results. Of course, if you wanted to break down and look for 404 in one of the sources and not the other, then this probably is going to make this isn't going to work for you. But I guess my point is, hopefully you're getting a chance to see how this stuff works. Now, the next thing it wants me to talk about here is something called live tail. And there's a couple ways I can get the live tail. I can go up here to new and I can click live tail and write my query. Or I can go to this more action button and I can click on live tail here. And what this is going to do is this is going to run this query in live tail. Now, what's live tail? Live tail shows me data as it's being ingested into Sumo Logic. So here I am seeing the results of this query as the data comes into Sumo Logic. Now, only 20 people can, on a system, concurrently run live tail. Okay? Live tail can only be used by a maximum of 20 people on a system. So for all of you trying to jump on live tail right now, some of you probably can't get there. And then if I want to highlight something, there's a highlight button, this A button over here. And I can say, you know what, I want to highlight maybe HTTP, and maybe I want to highlight my 404 and whatever. And so I can highlight certain things as this stuff gets ingested. I can also pause this. I can split the screen, run 2 live tails concurrently, side by side, whatever. And that's live tail. Now, one important thing about live tail, if I change this and I say Apache/access, and I want to search for 404, you'll notice that it searches for my 404 and it highlights it for me. How nice. And I see the messages that have a 404 in it. You'll find later on there is a problem with live tail and using these fields, but specifically using the field extraction rule stuff, which we haven't talked about. So when we get into that in the next couple of labs, I will point that out. But you'll notice I could use wildcards in here. You'll notice I can use, field values in here, 404. I could even do something like 404 or 304. Helps if I put the parenthesis the right way. And so this shows me data as it's being ingested into Sumo Logic. And really the only people that need to run live tail are people who set up your collectors and your sources to make sure that data is coming in. Okay. So that's live tail. Okay. When you split the live tail into 2 live tails, is that considered 2 users? No, I think it's only considered 1 user. Good question, Tim. I hadn't thought about it, but that's fine. But yeah, I think it's only 1 user. So, Vera, is there a question? Vera, I think you raised your hand. Is there a question? Okay. Okay. How did I get the live tail? Okay. So here inside Sumo Logic, I can get there one of 2 ways. One, in my search, I can click on my more action button over here and I can select live tail. That's how I got there. But another way I can get there is I can click new and I can click live tail here. And then I can type in my query. So 2 different ways of getting a live tail.
if you use the other way that he just showed, you don't get the autofill answers that you would in a normal search. Yeah,
Correct.
it's just direct text, so
Correct. Yeah.
you
you
maybe
gotta-
want to do your search beforehand if you're getting used to the search terms and then convert it to live tail rather than starting in live tail.
Yep. That's a good observation. Yep. Yep. So excellent. Thank you very much. All right. We have finished up lab number 1, and just to kind of help you out here a little bit, there's a couple of questions here for you. So question number 1, in that first line that we typically type in, where we put in keywords like 404 or Safari or whatever, is those keywords case sensitive or not? Or is that query case insensitive? Is statement number 1 true or false? Let me know in the chat box. True or false? Kind of get you in the mood for taking the test. All right. Shakib says false, Tim says false, and so forth and so on. It is false. That is correct. You are right. Now, and is implicitly implied in question number 2, or must be explicitly stated. Is that statement true or false? Again, I got a bunch of trues. That's absolutely correct. Very good. Nice work. And then keywords and metadata can use wildcards for live tail. And that statement is also true. Okay.
Is there a way to force case sensitivity on the first line at all if you
Yep.
really want it to be case sensitive?
Yep, I figured somebody's going to ask that question. You can use we have an upper and a lower function that you can use to force upper or lower functions.
So you do a pipe and then upper, right?
Actually,
Pipe
Yeah.
operation, you mean,
I
right?
actually I think you do upper and then do your command, but that's a function, so put it inside parentheses.
Okay.
Okay, so somebody asked the question, what's the answer for 3? True. John, it's true. You can use wildcards. I just did. I use wildcards for Apache / whatever. So now that takes us to lab 2, but before we get into lab 2, I told you we'd take a break. So let's take a 10-minute break, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna fire up my 10-minute timer here. And when this timer gets down to 0, let's come back. So go grab yourself something cold to drink, hot drink, and I'll see you back here in about 9 minutes and 52 seconds. Have a good break.
Could we
There it is.
maybe ask some unrelated questions during the break? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead. But the only thing is, I really want everybody to get the benefit of the question and the answer. So
Okay, sure.
that's the only reason I
And-
want to postpone them.
Okay, that's fine.
But yeah, okay, we'll take care of it after the break. Thanks. Hey, folks, hopefully we're all back and ready to go. So let me answer some questions here for you, because obviously there's a few questions that came up. One question came up, is there any way we can change the session timeout? And the answer to that question is yes, you can. In Sumo Logic, if you go into our training environment, and again, you open up the navigation panel, and you click on the lower right-hand corner where it says training analyst with your number on there. And if you go into your preferences, here under your preferences, you will see there is a web session timeout value. And you see, I put mine to like 2 days. Okay. Certainly want to make it more than 15 minutes. So you can make it at least 2 hours. And that should then solve that problem. And Ron, hopefully that answers your question. Ronald, hopefully that answers your question, sir. By the way, don't forget to click save at the bottom. Scroll down and hit save. So that's how you can do that. Now, there were some other questions that were wanted to be asked here before the break. So what questions have you? What other questions do y'all have?
What about the index meta? We use index to partition lower environment data. Do you want to, I mean, is that worth talking about or
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, hang on. Okay.
sorry about that. I mean,
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. No, it's actually something that they've been touting, tiers and indexes and stuff like that. And so I understand, but the easiest way for me to get into that is that I can go back here. And again, if I do an underscore, I see there's a value here called index. And so I can see the various indices that we have. And then you can search by your indexes. Or you can also search by your data tier. Now, one thing that you can also do, something that we've recently done, people have complained and said, you know, Sumo, your query language is a little bit complicated, you know, and they're not wrong, but you know, it's with complication comes great power. But so what we've done here is in Sumo Logic is over here on the more action button, we've created something called basic mode. Basic mode. And if you click on basic mode, here you can drop and say, here's what data tier I want. Here's the indices from that data tier that I want. Here's the filters that I want. And here's the keywords that I want. And it basically builds this search for you. So this is something new that we recently added about 2 months ago. And we're continually trying to enhance to make it easy. So it's a basic mode designed to make it easy for people to write queries. So does that answer your question ad nauseum or?
yeah, no, that was fantastic. I didn't even know about data tier. Wow. Thanks.
No problem. But we typically try to do everything in advanced mode to make it easy on ourselves. What other questions have you? By the way, this class is being done under the watchful eye. Here, if I can get out of the way, Max, let's see, where are you, everybody? Oh, you can probably be able to see him in the back. But the watchful eye of our dog, Max. So he's down here supervising, making sure I do everything right. So just wanted you all to know. And of course, I also grabbed myself a snack, which Max, of course, wanted to be part of. So anyway, yeah, he's adorable. He is. So there you go. Good, Megan. So you'll find one thing in Sumo. In fact, if those of you don't know, Sumo was actually initially named after the creator's dog. So that's how Sumo got its name. So we're very much a dog friendly company, to say the least. Now, let us get into lab 2, unless there are other questions. Vera, I thought you had a question, man. You had your hand up. Also, let me enable the people to talk. So Vera, you have a question, man? Okay. Are there any other questions before we get started? Well, let's get started. We got labs to cover here. So here in lab 2, what we want to do is we're going to add to a query that we previously created. So back here earlier, I did this source category equals lab / Apache / star, actually. And there's my results. Now, again, I mentioned that we have this thing here called source category. And so I can add a new line. And to add a new line, it's a Shift Enter or an Alt Enter, depending on which keyboard you're on. If you're on a Mac keyboard, a Shift Enter works. If you're on a Windows keyboard, I believe it's an Alt Enter. Then we type in a pipe. A pipe means I've got an additional command. Those who are familiar with Unix, we string our commands together with pipes. Same sort of thing here. So pipe, and then I'm going to say I want to count by. Helps if I spelled count correctly, count by. And I noticed it wasn't spelled correctly because it didn't change color. And I want to count by source category. And so now this count results in this aggregates tab. And I can now see how many messages I have out of my 28,000 here are from this source and how many are from this source. And if I wanted to, I can now create a pie chart or some sort of a visualization if I wanted to. You're only going to get these visualization icons on the aggregates tab, which means that you must do some form of aggregation. See, on the messages tab, it doesn't exist. So you must do some form of aggregation in order to be able to see a visualization. Okay. Then the other thing they have us do here is they're going to do a parse regex. So let's go back here. Step 2. Let me remove this. Type in pipe. Do a parse. And as I do a parse, I get all kinds of little choices here, and I can do a parse regex. And again, it gives me some choices. My advice to you on a parse regex is to take this code that's right here, and you should be able to swipe on it and click on it. And now I can't seem to do that. Well, I'll copy it. I'll do it that way. Huh, okay. Parse regex, and again, like I said, normally you should be able to copy and paste this. Or the other thing you can do in our lab examples, you can copy and paste these. So I'm going to copy and paste this. Get rid of the second pipe. Now, what a parse regex does is it's parsing using regular expressions. And regular expressions, again, is not a Sumo creation. It's a World Wide Web Consortium standard. And what we're basically doing here is we're going to create a field called IP address. And what we're looking for is 1 to 3 digits, followed by a decimal point, followed by 1 to 3 digits, followed by a decimal point, followed by 1 to 3 digits, followed by a decimal point, followed by 1 to 3 digits. You and I know this as a V4, version 4 IP address. And so as it does, it goes through here and it finds the IP address out of here. Now, something I want to point out to you. Remember, I'm looking at 2 different data sources, my Apache error logs and my Apache access logs. Here in my Apache error logs, you'll notice that my IP address is under this field called client. That's where my IP address is. In my Apache access logs, let me see if I can jump to one real quick. Here in my Apache access logs, my IP is in the very front of the message. So the nice thing about a parse regex is that it goes through the messages looking for character matchup. And if it finds it anywhere in the message, it can use it. So I don't have to, my messages can be structured differently when I use regexes, regular expressions. Okay. But because of how it has to parse through this thing as a regular expression, parse regexes aren't as fast as other parsing mechanisms. Parse anchors, parse CSVs, things like that, because it does take a little bit of processing overhead. And now that I have my IP address, my source IP there, I can add a pipe and I can say count by, and I can count by IP underscore address. And again, that count is going to create this aggregates tab. And now I can see there's my IP addresses. If I want to, I can sort this. So I can add another line and say sort by, and I want to sort actually by the count, not by the IP address. So, and this, I'm going to type in underscore count, and I could say I want to sort it in descending order or ascending order, or if I leave it off, it sorts it in descending order by default. We do things in descending order by default. Now, you may ask yourself, wait a second, this operator up here is count. This operator is underscore count. What happened? Count is an operator. It counts things. And so if I were to count objects in a room, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the operator. But the results are stored in underscore count. Underscore count. And so that's what we're trying to show you there. Okay. Is there a specific order needed for additional commands? That's a good question, Karen. It's more of a processing thing of what you're trying to do. So before I can sort something, I've obviously got to count something or aggregate something, right? So there is an order, but it's a logical order. What are you trying to do? And more to the point, Karen, if I go back to my slides and I go back to this specific slide, this is typically the order that we do things in. We do our metadata and keyword search, then we parse and do all the parsing, then we do our filtering, then we do our aggregation, and then we do our formatting. That is typically the process we take. So I hope, Karen, that answers your question. You're welcome. And Derek, is there a question from you, sir?
Yeah, so normally when you search, when you like filter a result by, typing in a string, like let's say Mozilla, like in that example, if you were to type like a substring of that, like for example, Moz, it wouldn't match. I guess, I mean, you would just use the wildcard in that case. So I think.
Yeah, that's what we're using here in the slide. And that's typically what we use. We use that wildcard.
Yeah, okay.
However, let's be careful here because it's looking for anything that starts with a 5 and it doesn't care what it ends with. So if the number were 5,264,213, that would still be considered a match. Fortunately, all my status code fields are only 3 digits. So you want to be careful with wildcards because they can, depending on the data, they can do some interesting behaviors. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, and then from here, if I want to, let me just chop it off at about 1,000. So what I also want to do now that I've got my count, I want to maybe filter and say where underscore count is greater than 1,000. So logically, and my advice to you, and like any programming class you ever had in college or high school or whatever, my advice is start with 1 or 2 lines and test it, and add a couple more lines and test it, build it out. Now what I can do now that I have this, if I want to, is I can go ahead and click and make a donut or something out of it. And if I want to, I can add it to a dashboard. So here's the part where I'm going to talk a little bit about dashboards. So here, I can give it a panel name, again, Apache status codes. And then I can go in here to give it a name, JWM, search, mastery class. And I'll just put in here today's date, 11/03. Okay. I'm going to save it as a new dashboard. We haven't talked about new dashboards at all, so I thought I'd take a moment and show you new dashboards. So here in my new dashboard, I can rearrange the order of this and move it around and resize it. If I want to, here in this, I can actually edit this query right here in the dashboard. And I can change, its structure, make it a honeycomb. I can conditionally format it based on these values. Again, pick different types of displays, pick different kinds of colors. I can change my labels and all that fun stuff. Here's my Apache status codes. I can change that, change its font, all that good stuff. Here's where I can link my dashboards together. I can create a link so when somebody clicks on something here, I can have them go to another dashboard. I can change my axes, my display overrides, modify my axes. Do I want to see a left axis, a right axis, dual axes? What do I want? My various legend properties. And by the way, your legend is fully functional. You can use your legends here to select things that you want and filter. And then most importantly down here, you've got the JSON. So you can actually modify the JSON directly yourself if you want to. So if there's a certain color scheme and stuff you want to, you can incorporate that JSON in here. You can copy this to the clipboard, you can update it, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. And then when I'm done monkeying around, I can say update this. And if I want to add a new panel in my dashboard, I can add it right here. I can build these dashboards very, very easily. Now, what this new dashboard functionality does not have is live mode yet. And that's why we haven't gone crazy with promoting the heck out of these new dashboards. But these new dashboards are really, really handy and really, really powerful and functional. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention to you about dashboards. By the way, if you want to change this to a dark background in here, switch to a dark theme, switch to a light theme. We also now have the ability to export these as JSON or as PDF or as PNG. The PDF export is something that people have been asking for a very long time. So there you have it. A little conversation there about dashboards. Throw that one in there. And again, these other exercises here are just parsing out the information. This, by the way, is a parse regex statement. This is a parse anchor. And the message is you can combine different parsing mechanisms in the same query. So I can do a parse JSON and a parse CSV and a parse regex all in the same query. Also here, I'm doing a sum on my size. And this as statement is, instead of calling it underscore size or underscore sum, we're calling it total bytes. So this is how you can rename something. I could say count of whatever my field is, and then I can put an as clause in there and give it a new name here if I want. And then I'm filtering by my top 10 IP addresses. So let me go ahead and press on here a little bit, and let's get through lab 3, and then it gets much more simple and much more straightforward. In lab 3, we want to talk a bit about parsing. And so I'm going to grab myself a new log search, and I want to parse some JSON data. Now, I happen to know that CloudTrail data is JSON format. So I'm going to go grab my source category, and I am going to grab my lab/AWS/CloudTrail, and I want to look at some data there. And this is all in JSON. Now, what's cool about JSON is JSON, of course, is the latest darling of the data world. And so here I have various fields that we have. And because JSON is now so popular, what we've done is in this little gear switch I showed you earlier, there's an auto parse mode that's enabled, that's turned on by default. And what I mean by that is if we encounter a JSON log, and its auto parse mode is set to automatic, it will automatically parse those fields and put those fields in our field browser. I've turned it off. I've gotten rid of a bunch of fields here. If I go back in here and turn it back on, whenever we encounter a JSON log, we will automatically parse the fields and put them in the browser. So if you want AWS region, you can check mark it, and there it is. It's extracted. If you want error code, you can extract it, you check mark it, and check mark it. There we go. If you want, any of these fields account, you can check mark it and go to town. And so you can very easily just start adding and parse and all that good stuff. Okay. So that's what this switch does. And again, it adds these fields to your field browser. And that's what it's really trying to tell you here. So I can, if I want to, because these fields exist, I don't have to check mark them. But because these fields exist, I can use these fields. I can say count by AWS region. And it's going to automatically count by my AWS region. I think I misspelled something there. ASW. There we go. Spelling does matter. There we go. There we go. So now I see out of my total number of messages here how it breaks down. Okay. Now we want to talk about three things: no drop, parse field, and parse multi. So let's talk about those things. Let me go back here to my Apache Air. When I look at my Apache error logs, I really have two different kinds of messages. One that typically has, actually I've got three different kinds of messages here now, but I have one that has my client IP address, and I have one that has a error warning message type thing. So if I were to do a parse anchor like we have here, and the way we're going to do this parse anchor is really simple. We're going to go find a message that has the client and an IP address. And I want to anchor on this particular bracket. And I want to stop anchoring on that particular bracket. So I swipe over from bracket to bracket where it says client and it has an IP address. Then I right click on this and I say parse selected text. This brings it up to me in a panel. Then I'm going to swipe over where the IP address is. As I said, I'm going to swipe over where the IP address is. I can double click on it too. And I'm going to click to extract that. That's going to replace this with a star. And down here, I can call this whatever field I want. How about IP address? And when I click submit, it's now going to add this line of code. And when I run this, it's now going to parse out my IP address. Now, interesting thing I want you to know. Remember we talked earlier about in our first line, we could specify our metadata and any keywords that we want to filter by, right? Let me comment out this parse anchor statement for a second. Where you comment out a line is 2 forward slashes. Okay, so I've commented out this line and you'll see I've got about 1,851 messages. If I uncomment out this line and run it, you'll see I'm down to about 947 messages. So not only does a parse statement extract out my field, but if something doesn't match my parse statement, I automatically drop it or delete it. Now that's going to happen unless you specify in your command the statement no drop. If you add no drop to this, then it doesn't drop any of those other messages. And that's the value of no drop. In fact, we recommend, test question here, we recommend that if you're getting inconsistent results with your parse statements, that you add no drop to it and see maybe what you're deleting, what you're actually getting rid of. So it's a good troubleshooting tip.
That no drop command. I was going to ask a question, trying to figure out like a workaround to work around the fact that the parsing drops the results it doesn't match with, but that no drop command solves it. I mean, that's really huge. I think that that's like a really important command that everyone here should remember for sure.
Absolutely. I agree. So it is probably one of the more important things that you'll see in today's class. So, because otherwise, like I said, not only does a parse statement pull out the field that you want, but it also actually filters your query by default, unless you specify that no drop. So you need to be aware of that, and you need to apply that no drop liberally. Now, I can go through here and I can see that I've got another type of message. where I've got this mod log SQL database connection error. And so I'm going to do a parse anchor on this. I'm going to swipe over this, and I'm going to grab this lovely message. And I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to parse selected text. And here I am going to just take out my message, and I'm going to extract that, and I'm going to call it message. You'll notice it added this in there. Doesn't have a no drop on there right now. So when I run it, it runs and grabs my error logs. Then it grabs this message filtering for anything that has a message. And because there's a no drop in here, I don't have any messages left for this line to parse. So again, I want to add the no drop so that I can see both my IP address stuff and my message stuff. Looks like I parsed a little too much out of here. This parse statement is not quite right as far as my message goes. Actually, maybe it is. Hold on. No, I'm not seeing my messages. So I'll
Is
have
it
to play with
deleting
that.
space?
Yeah, probably an extra space in here somewhere. Yeah,
In front of mod log.
let's try that. Okay. There we go. Thank you. Good catch. So there we go. And so we're getting the results and stuff that we're looking for. But as you can see, and as somebody mentioned, no drop is very powerful. It keeps you from deleting or dropping certain messages that you may need and you may want. Okay. And that's what we're trying to tell you here in step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. By the way, if you want to, you can use an is blank function to test if something's blank and then filter it out, right? I only want to see where this value is blank. Now, the other two things we want to talk about here are parse field, and we want to talk about parse multi. Take parse multi first. I'm going to grab myself a new query. Is there a question?
Yeah, can you chain together multiple no drop parses to try and extract a single attribute that might have like a different format between different logs?
Yes, but if you've got different format between different logs, you probably want to use a parse regex and not a parse anchor.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Somebody asked the question, what's the difference between is blank and is null? That's an excellent question. And so let's talk about that for a second here. I'm going to do a Google search, Sumo Logic is blank. And if I go out here, it's going to refer me to a document that is one of my favorites. What is the difference between is null, is empty, and is blank? And here you go. Here's the difference. And so it's a great question. And my message to you is I'm not going to be able to cover each and everything that you guys all want to talk about ad nauseum. I'm sorry, one at a time. But hopefully we've given you the ability to go in here and get this information out so that you going forward can now answer these questions yourselves. Okay. So yeah, great question. So now what I want to do here is I'm going to do step number 8, lab 2, lab 3, step number 8. And so what I want to do is I want to look at my snort logs. Now my snort logs are a firewall application device. So I'm going to go in here and grab source category. And like I said, it's a very popular thing. And I'm going to go to labs/snort. And I'm going to go ahead and run a query. Now, when I look at my lab/snort, you'll see here that I have 2 IP addresses. I have an IP address here. This is my source IP address. This is my source port. Destination IP address, destination port. Okay. The problem is that when I go in here and I parse out, and I can do a parse by regex or by parse anchor, probably want to do it by regex. When I do a parse regex here, and I parse out an IP address, it only encounters the first IP address and parses it out. Okay. So it parsed out this first IP address. It didn't get to the second IP address. Okay. In fact, it went to the next message, didn't get to the second IP address there. The way that you get around that, if you have multiple occurrences of a match, you type in the word multi. And now it will go through and find all multiple occurrences. And so what it will do in this case is it looks at the first message and sees, oh, I've got 2 matches. So it's going to make a copy of that first message. automatically makes a copy of it. Okay. And then it parses out the first IP addresses. Then it parses out the second occurrence of an IP address. Then it goes to the second message, looks it over and says, oh, I got two matches, copies it. First IP address, second IP address. You'll notice that your number of results will basically double. Just to prove a point, we comment out the multi. My number of results right now is about 1,367. When I add the multi, because there's two IP addresses in each message, it basically doubles. Now, the good news is don't worry about that. That's not something you're going to get charged for. You only get charged for what you ingest, not for what you run in a query. So not a big deal. That's what the multi command does. If you got multiple instances that you want, you'll be all set. All right. There are 3 IP addresses that would give you 3. All right. So that's what that's all about. Now, the one in the middle here, this parse field. If you and I are parsing a field out and we want to parse it further, we want to use the parse field command. So here I've got my GitHub logs and I'm looking for the word committer. Why? Because I know that committer has an email address field in it, and I'm going to parse out that email field. Now, what I want to do is I want to take this email field and I want to parse it out further. I want to extract out the username. I want to extract out the domain name. So if you want to parse out an existing field, the command that you're going to use is called parse field equals, and then the name of the field is email in this case. And then I'm going to put my pattern matching. Hang on a second. Double quote. I want star at star, which is I want what was before the star, what's after the star. And the field names, I'm going to type in as and give them a name. I want the user field. And then I want the domain field. And I need to put a comma here between the user and domain. So now I've got my fields here. So here's my domain field. Here's my email field. Here's my user field. This displays them in alphabetical order. D, E, U. I want to change the order. I can use the fields command, FIELDS, and I can specify the order that I want. So I want user first, then I want domain, then I want email. And that changes the order. Okay. And that's what that's all about. Now, the last conversation here deals about field extraction rules. And I mentioned this to the folks who were with me yesterday. Your administrator or whoever sets up your sources and your collectors and all that fun stuff can create something called field extraction rules. So here under manage data, here under logs, you'll see I've got a tab here called field extraction rules. And basically what we're doing is as we ingest, in this case, from my Apache access logs, I am parsing out these fields, making these fields available to people in the field browser. So when you or I go into our Apache access logs, in our messages fields, we see these fields in our field browser, and we can select these fields if we want to. Okay. We can select these fields and use these fields, and they're already pre-parsed. So the good news is as you extract things, if you ingest things, it automatically extracts and creates out these fields for you. And like I said, we teach this how to do field extraction rules in the admin class, which is coming up tomorrow, just so you know. And you guys right now don't have permissions to do this. The account you'll have tomorrow will have permissions to do that. One other thing I want to mention about field extraction rules here. Hang on a second. Shakib asked a question: does the parse command take values from all JSON field? Remember, JSON automatically parses because of this setting right here. this setting is set to auto parse mode, those fields are going to be there automatically as part of your JSON fields. So you don't have to do a parse command is what I'm trying to say if you've got JSON in our product. So hopefully Shakib, that answers your question. Now, one thing I do want to mention to you all with regards to parsing fields. I'm sorry, field extraction rules, excuse me. If I do a underscore source category, and I realize time is my enemy here, I need to be careful. I go out here and grab my Apache access logs, right? And earlier we said, or we don't even need the and, 404, this is going to find a 404 anywhere in my message. But maybe I only want to find a 404 in the status code field. Because I have field extraction rules, I have this field called status code. So I can do something like this. Status code equals 404. And now when I run it, it's only going to take and find 404s in my status code field. So this is a bit more precise. However, if you take this and try to run this in LiveTail, LiveTail will throw an error. Big error. Why? My status code field comes from my field extraction rules. My field extraction rules have not been processed yet. Remember, LiveTail is when I ingest my data into Sumo. So it has no idea what the status code thing is. If I get rid of that, now it will ingest my data and I will see any message that has a 404 in it. This will in fact work. I may have to wait a couple seconds, but it will in fact work. There you go. So the point is you cannot use field extraction rules in LiveTail. And that's my message to you. And that takes care of lab number 3. Good news. Everything should flow fairly quicker now. And the bad news is I'm running a little short on time. So the good news is I should get you done here in about 20 minutes or so. So lab 4, conditional operators. Here's where we can use statements like if statements or whatever. So if I take this code, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab this code, and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new log search, and I'm going to paste this code in there. Now, if you want to comment out a line of code, as I said, it's 2 forward slashes. If you want to comment out several lines of code, if you're on a Mac keyboard, you hold down the Option key. If you're on a Windows keyboard, you hold down your Alt key. And you'll notice that your cursor changes to a plus sign. And then if you drag a line down, you'll see you get a little line there. And whatever you type is going to be typed across all lines. So if I type in 2 forward slashes or even 2 forward slashes in a space, that then comments out those lines. So that's how you can comment out a bunch of lines at the same time. Again, what am I doing here? I've got my Apache access logs. I am parsing out my status code. Now, this line right here is using an if statement, and it's basically creating a new field called successes. And if my status code is equal to 200, it's going to put a 1 in there. Otherwise, it's going to put a 0 in there. So if I run this, I'm going to look through here and see, do I have a status code of 200? No, then I'm going to put a 0 there. If I have a status code of 200, I'll put a 1 in there. Then I'm going to go through and I'm going to run another one. This time I'm going to create a field called client errors. And I'm looking for a 404. And if it's a 404, I put a 1 in there. Otherwise, I put a 0 in there. So now I've got my client errors, I've got my successes, and I've got either 1s or 0s in there. Then I can aggregate those values. I'm going to sum my successes, and I'm going to call it successes count. I'm going to sum my client errors and call it client error count. And it, of course, helps if I get rid of this slash. There we go. And so this sum has created my aggregates tab. And now I can see the sum of my successes and the sum of my errors. And if I wanted to, I could divide and get a percentage and all that good stuff. And that's what we're trying to show you. Now, these are testing for equality, right? Is this exact number? These are doing string matches. So here I'm looking for string status code matches and starts with a 4. Could be a 401, a 402, a 409, but it's got to start with a 4. Same with this one, it starts with a 5. Moving on to lab number 5. Here we're going to talk about subqueries. This is one of my favorite queries in our arsenal. I'm going to take this query. You've seen it before. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it in here. And I'm going to run it. And over the last 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, you'll see that I have had several different IP addresses that have been trying to access my Apache access logs. Great. Now, what if I find that there's somebody who's trying to access my Apache access logs, and I see this as a form of an error, and then I want to filter my Apache access logs to see what that IP address has been doing? This is why we use a subquery. So here I have another query, which is going to be my child query, which I'll talk about in a second. And this child query is going to look at my Apache error logs, and specifically it's looking for the message file does not exist, okay? And then it parses out my error and my IP address. And I notice these are all coming from the same IP address. Now, I'm going to then count by that IP address. And so I see here is my IP address, and here's the number of instances that I have. And then I really want to only restrict it down to one IP address. Now, I can use the top function, or I can use the top K function. The difference between the top function and the top K function is that the top K function also includes a rank that I quite frankly really don't need. I could have used the top function, but we wanted to show you another way of seeing something. And the point is, I want to take this IP address and I want to pass it back to this query, and I want to then see where that IP address has been going. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a subquery. And the way we do a subquery is really quite simple. The structure is going to be our parent query. Then we're going to put our child query in here with a tag that says bracket subquery colon, and it's going to end in a bracket. And we're also going to add as a last command here a pipe that says compose, what do I want to pass back, in this case, the IP field. And then I'm going to put the word keywords in there. And what that keywords means is it's kind of a placeholder, so that when it runs this parent command, it's going to add this keyword and filter for that IP address. So let me add into here, add some new lines. Let me add my bracket. Go down here, add my end bracket. Up here in my bracket, I am going to start with the word subquery and put a colon in there. Then I'm going to go grab my subquery here, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste this information in here. And I need to add a new line to the subquery. Again, compose, and the field here is called IP. So I want to pass out that IP, and I'm going to throw in the word keywords. Now, when I run this, what's going to happen is the subquery is going to run first. It's going to find the IP address here, the top one IP address. Then it's going to run this parent query, my access, with that IP address. So here, as you look, I'm seeing that same IP address, and I can see where that one IP address has been going in my Apache access logs. And that is what we can use subqueries for. Question, can you have more than one subquery in a query? Can I nest subqueries? What do you think? Yes or no? Can I nest my subqueries? Yes, absolutely correct. Yep, excellent. Sure can. You sure can.
I'm still a little bit confused about how the subquery works here, to be honest.
Okay, I appreciate it. So what's happening is that my subquery actually runs first. And in this case, it's looking in my Apache error logs for any messages that has file does not exist. And then it parses out the time, the error, and the IP address. I really don't care about the time and the error, but I do care about the IP address. And then I'm going to take this IP address and I am going to put in a little magical word that says compose IP address keyword, which then passes that IP address back to this parent query. So the parent query runs my Apache access logs with that IP address, and I can see where that IP address has been. So what this subquery does is it, again, executes a subquery and then goes back and executes the parent query with the results of the subquery. So in this case, if I had somebody who was maliciously attacking my network, I could run a query for that, identify who that is or that IP address, and then I can see what they've been trying to access across my network, across my system or whatever in this type of example. Does that help?
Yeah, I think I was just confused because the ordering of child and parent seems a little bit reversed in how I would think about it. But
Right.
yeah, it makes sense.
See, unfortunately, the parent comes first. So when you build the query out, here's your parent. Then here's your subquery, and it's being treated as a subquery. That's why the subquery tag is important. So this actually runs first, and then it appends the results to the parent query. So yeah, I can understand where the language may throw you off.
So
One of
what
the
you're
things-
doing,
Go ahead. Yes.
so what you're doing is running the subquery, getting the time, the error, and the IP parsed out. Then
Mhm.
taking the IP and using compose, it puts it at the top as a keyword and then searches that for that keyboard within the main query. Is that right?
Correct. That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely correct. One other thing, in all of our labs, we have links here to more information about subqueries and more information about some of this stuff. And you're welcome to check it out because I'm sure some of you want to put in parameters and all kinds of other stuff, and that documentation talks about it. Okay.
What are the square brackets?
The square brackets are just to denote that we've got an element inside of here, a subquery.
Gotcha.
It's just the syntax. We could use parentheses for
subquery,
that for something else. Sorry.
yeah, the subquery, you've got returns one row,
Mhm.
basically. You've got the top K, one count. What happens if the subquery returns more than one row?
Okay. It then obviously will filter, the parent filter will filter on the results it gets back. So
So
if it
is
gets
it,
back 2 IP addresses, it would filter on 2 IP addresses or 3 IP addresses. Now,
does it do an or an and for that?
I believe it does a or, but I'm not sure. Again, what we could do is check this out and check out this documentation to find out and to make sure. But I believe it's an or.
That would make sense.
Yes, that would make sense. And if I were to design it, that's what I do. Okay.
Yep, right there, you got it. Results have and between columns and or between rows.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
And that's the point. I want you all to see the power of our documentation. We work very hard on it. So again, we do have stuff like that, and it does, I want you to be aware.
So
Okay.
the parse statement there.
Yep.
Are we assuming the first two stars are time and error? I'm
This
trying to
parse
understand.
statement is it's doing a parse anchor. Okay. And so remember when we do that, we create stars. So the first field was time, the second field was error, the third field was IP.
That's right. Okay, never mind. Got it. Thank you.
No problem. That's fine. Again, guys, this is probably the 6th, 7th, or 8th time, maybe we're lucky that you've seen this. In many cases, it's the first time. So to make the transition from what you've seen before and apply that knowledge to this, that's a good step. That's an excellent step. So I applaud your comprehension there. All right. Lab 6, plotting clients on a map. We are going to do a geo lookup operator. And again, if I were to open this up in a new tab and look at the geo lookup directions, you'll see that we have a partnership with a company called New Star. And we basically pass to New Star an IP address, and it passes us back a latitude, a longitude, it passes us back a latitude, a longitude, the continent, the country code, the country name, et cetera, et cetera. And then if we do a count on that, if we have latitude, longitude, and count, we will have the option to make a map. out of this, a map chart. So there's two parts to this. One, getting the information from Newstar, and then rendering the Mapbox plot. So here in the lab, if I take all this lovely code and I copy it and I paste it into a new search box, okay, again, I'm looking at my Apache access logs. This is a parse anchor to get the IP address. I'm going to take this IP address, I'm going to pass it in my lookup command. So my lookup command does three things. We can actually look up and save values in our product. We can actually use it to do a CrowdStrike lookup, or we can do it to use a geographic lookup. So here I am invoking the lookup command. I'm passing this information in as the IP. This is the URL for Newstar for us. And I'm asking it for the latitude and the longitude. Then I'm going to count by latitude and longitude. And then if I want to here, I can sort the count. So when I run this, I have a series of latitudes, longitudes, and the number of count, the number of instances from each of those latitudes and longitudes. And you'll notice this little icon right here is enabled. This is my Mapbox plot. And so when I click on my Mapbox plot, it now renders it as a Mapbox plot, as long as I have latitude, longitude, and count. Watch. Switch this back. Let me comment out longitude here. So I have latitude and I have count. I don't have longitude. I don't have this icon. Can't click on it. I need at a minimum a latitude, a longitude, and count. I could also, if I want to, ask for country name. And I could display by country name. I don't need that for my map rendering. But there I have my country name. And again, all I need to render as a Mapbox plot is lat, long, and count. And of course, I can also go in here on the East Coast. And as I break in here to the East Coast, it starts breaking out my numbers so I can see where things are really happening. Okay. Thomas, question, sir.
I don't know if you have time for this, but you mentioned CrowdStrike. Is that a different type of training session, or is there a quick
It's
example?
actually a part of our security training session.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, I would do the security monitoring and analytics class,
Got it. Thank you.
or just look up, just do a Sumo logic threat intel, and we should have a frequently asked questions here. And so here is information about CrowdStrike and how to use that and all that good stuff. And I will copy and put this into the chat box. So you can look at that stuff and figure out what's going on. Now, for those of you familiar with CrowdStrike, you know, CrowdStrike normally costs you lots of money, right? So to be able to take and pass in an IP address or a domain name or an email address into them and get the information about that, that costs money. With Sumo Logic, you don't have to, you don't have to have an account with them. You use our account. We pay for that. And so you can write queries and have that information go to CrowdStrike and get information about that threat. So just want you to be aware of that. All right, moving right along. Calculate changes in moving averages. And again, I'm just trying to get this thing done here in the next 5 minutes or so. The difference in the smooth operator. Okay. If I want to take, oops, I'm sorry, let me grab this code again. By the way, you notice I've got a lot of tabs here open. I'm going to close them all. By going to the more action button on any one tab, there's an option here to close all tabs. And that kind of resets things and makes things look pretty and nice. So there's my code. Now what I'm doing here is I'm looking at my Apache access log. I'm invoking this time slice of 1M. And since I've got 15 minutes, that would be 15 1-minute buckets. Or if I go to 60 minutes, it's going to be 60 1-minute buckets. Then I want to count by my time slices and sort by my time slices. So bear with me here a second. So I'm going to count and sort by my time slices. Let me comment out this last line for a second. So here's my time slices, and here is my count. Now what I want to do is I want to use the difference function, difference method. And so here I have this number minus this number gives me this number. This number minus this number gives me this number. This number minus this number gives me this number. And if I display this, for example, as a line chart, maybe I'm looking at my inventory levels. So here I'm looking at my inventory levels, and then I can see based on my inventory going up or whatever, I'm sorry, excuse me, look at my sales, how many of these I've sold. So I've sold this many, which means my inventory has been depleted, okay? Or to use a bad example, I'm talking about COVID patients. As my number of COVID patients increases or decreases, my number of hospital beds increase or whatever. So this is where the difference operator can become handy. You can see the change of things that happen, okay? So that's a difference operator. And then we also have one here for rolling average. And so here in my rolling average, make this 60 minutes. Again, all I'm basically doing is the same sort of thing, except that I'm using this smooth operator. And my smooth operator is basically taking this number divided by 1 and give me this. These two numbers divided by 2 and give me this. These three numbers divided by 3 and give me this. It does this up to 10. Once it gets to 10, it adds the next number and deletes the oldest number and divides by 10. So eventually this thing kind of smooths out. And when I look at it, I can see, here's my data points, but I can see as kind of a rolling average what my real number is. So for example, this might be my checking account balance, which goes up and down frequently, but I can get an idea of what my rolling average is as far as what's in my various checking account balance. Okay. Question, George or Jose?
Yeah, for the moving average, is there a way to indicate like consider X amount of numbers behind?
Yep. So let's yes, the answer to your question is if you look up the smooth operator, you'll see that you can specify the number of data points.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, good. But by default, it's 10. Oh, one other thing I need to point out for the test. Again, in the test here, you can go into your settings, and in your settings, you can change your series so that this first, my error count is going to be a line chart, but my rolling average, I can make this a column chart, make this kind of a combination chart. I can also have it use a secondary axis so that I can, here's my data points, and then my column chart is going to use this axis over here. So you can change some of these settings around. And again, to do this, you're going to go into change series. That's where the setting is. Now, lab 8, here's where we get to do our friend log reduce. So just like we did yesterday, we went out here and we did a search for our snort logs. And I'm going to actually comment that out for right now. And I'm going to run my snort logs for, say, the last 60 minutes. And so I've got a lot of logs to review, about 6,000 logs in 60 minutes. So imagine I'm trying to review last night's logs, it would take me a while. Well, the good news is with log reduce, and if I click on this button, it actually writes a pipe and AX log reduce right there. And it will run this and it will combine my like messages. It will combine my like messages together. And here in my like messages, I can see out of my, it's done now, out of my 5,969 messages, 3,000 are this message and 1,400 or whatever are this message. Now, it also gives a relevant score, how relevant it is. And what happens is normally it would be whatever its value is based on its count. It would be close to 10, a high is 10, a low is 0. However, when I investigate this, I discover this information. It says the command.config file has been modified. Well, we just did a series of updates on the system, and that is what created the command.config file to be updated. it wasn't somebody trying to attack and maliciously attack my system. It was a function of trying to do upgrades. So the good news is I can demote that and give it a relevant score of 0. And therefore, when somebody looks at this report, they can say, okay, don't really need to worry about that. And so I can also go through here, and when I look at something here, I see that there's somebody successfully gained administrative privilege. When I investigate that, that's a serious issue. And of course, I have the IP address and I have the person who did this and all that, and I can talk to them. But the point is, I can also give it a thumbs up, which automatically makes it a relevant score of 10. So these relevant scores kind of give me an idea of how important or not important it is. Okay. Additionally, I can go in here and I can click on count, and I can actually see the specific messages that have that information if I want to. I can go back. Here's my regular messages. And in my regular messages here, you can see that I can look over here to the right by host, by name, or by category. If I find a message that I find particularly interesting, I can look plus or minus 1 minute, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, the messages before and after this. So I can investigate this much easier. Again, I can do it by name, by host, by category. Doesn't make any difference. I can go plus, minus 1, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10. Okay, so you can investigate this much easier. Now, I know a lot of you wants to do things with log reduce, and my advice to you is look up the documentation on log reduce, and you probably have examples of how to do what it is that you all want to do. Additionally, not only do we have log reduce, but we also have log compare. And what log compare will do is it will basically take my information right now, go back 60 minutes, and then it's going to do a log reduce on that. Then in this case, it's going to go back 24 hours, go back 60 minutes, do a log reduce on that. And then it's going to compare the two. That's what the log compare does. So really, if I'm trying to figure out, do I have problems? Do I have security issues? Having a point in time and looking at that through log reduce is okay. But being able to compare different days, I can see if things are getting better, things are getting worse, and are they getting better or worse significantly? So for example, this value here is 28, that's down 31%, right? So I'm looking for maybe big changes, big gains, big losses. Let me make this a little bit wider as far as time goes. Let me make this 24 hours. It'll obviously take a little while to churn. And actually, well, that's fine. Going back 24 hours, then going back 24 hours is kind of silly, but that's right, this will work. So what happens is that's going to calculate a difference, whether it's up or down, whether it's better or worse. The other words that you'll see there instead of a calculation is you may see words like new or gone. New means it wasn't there before, but now it's there. Gone means it was there before, but now it's not there. So you'll either see a percentage of change, or you will see the words new or the words gone. As you can see, it's still chewing on all the results. But this is much easier than going through 150,000 log entries, I think. And so I can see what things have changed, whether things have gotten better, things have gotten worse, that sort of thing.
And with the current context, you're looking back 24 hours, doing a log reduce, and then looking back an additional 24 hours from there and doing another log reduce, and it's comparing the results.
Correct, correct.
And that percentage difference, is that that's the first, that's what your base time back is, right?
Right,
So, okay,
Here's my base time as far as my
Gotcha.
individual log reduces. And then here's the time shift between my two log reduces.
okay.
And I just changed it to 7 day because it's probably a better example. I don't know about you, but my Mondays are very much like my Mondays. My Tuesdays are like my Tuesdays. My
Yeah.
Tuesdays are nothing like my Mondays. So usually we teach on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So those days are very similar in behavior. Monday is usually a meeting day, and Friday is kind of a wrap-up day. So, okay, some hands got raised. So what's the questions, folks?
So is there a way to feed the results of a log compare or log reduce into a visualization like a graph or a pie chart or whatnot?
Right. You would probably want to count them. So you're going to want to sit there and do some sort of a count here based on the various signatures or something like that. And I think, hang on a second, let's,
When I tried that, it tells me that you can't use like aggregate operators on.
oh,
with-
because log reduce. Yeah, you're right. Hang on a second. Sumo logic, log reduce.
Yeah, and I was looking at the documentation too for log reduce, and I didn't see anything
Okay.
that talked about transforming the results of it.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I've got to play.
Okay.
So I would check that out. The other thing is if I go out to a community. So I spelled correctly. See if we got some examples here about aggregating log reduce. Count by log messages, not popular metric.
Looks like I'll have to create the topic myself. This is something I've been trying to do since yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing too, by the way, I wanted to mention to you all, we have a Slack channel, public Slack channel. Obviously, here's our internal Slack channel, but we have a Sumo dojo. So if you go and look up Slack Sumo Logic, you can join this Slack channel and you can post your questions here. And a lot of people typically post all kinds of questions, about, gee, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z and all that fun stuff. And so I would encourage you to sign up and check it out and go have yourselves fun if you have Slack. So it's another resource that you can use.
Thank you.
Thank you. What other questions do we have?
Hey, John, this is Tim. Somebody earlier in the class mentioned something about using the minus sign in a search and said,
Yep.
you need to be careful about that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Sure. The actually, when doing a search or doing a parse anchor, if you put a dash in, it's not the minus sign, it's a dash. Okay.
Okay.
That's the issue because you want to make sure you're literally matching for what you're looking for. So you got to be careful about things like dashes. You got to be careful about, formatting type characters.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So that's my only worry. You want to be, think of this as a 2-year-old child. If you ask a 2-year-old child to wash his or her hands in the bathroom, a lot of times you got to be very specific or they're going to get very creative on you. If they can't reach the sink, they may use the toilet, whatever. And so you got to be very, it's kind of like any programming type thing you do. You got to be pretty explicit. Otherwise, you're going to get some really odd results.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem. And then the other thing too, on a different vein, when you sort, right, and do sort by or order by, you'll find that I usually specify, whether I want to go ascending or descending. You can also use a plus sign or a minus sign to specify that order. So sometimes in examples, you might see something like sort by status code minus. And it basically says I'm sorting it by status code in descending order. Just another way of doing it. And if you do a search by, sort by, or order by, you'll see that they talks about those symbols and how to use them. So
Cool.
since you
Thank you
mentioned,
very much.
no problem. Thank you. So you guys can see there's lots to talk about, so little time. That's why we got lots of classes. Anyway, so I did lab 8, which was log reduce, and I just did lab 9, which is log compare. And so we are in good shape there. Lab 10, another one of my favorites, the outlier function. So here in the outlier function, and this is really kind of one of my favorite little things here. Let me grab a new log search, paste this in. Let me give myself some time, like about 3 hours. Run this up. So here I'm looking at my Apache access log specifically for a status code of 404. And then I'm breaking things up in status codes of time slices of 1 minute. And I want to count my status codes, which I'm going to call error count. And I want to break it down by time slice. So if I do that and get rid of this last line and comment it out for a second, you'll see I have my time slices and I have my error count. Now, when I use this outlier function, what the outlier function is going to do is it's going to take based on my window here. My window is how many data points do I want to go back? So I'm going to take the last 10 data points, and I am going to calculate my mean, and I'm going to calculate a standard deviation. Then I'm going to use that standard deviation value, and in the case of threshold equals 3, I'm going to go plus or minus 3 standard deviations. And that's going to give me an upper and a lower boundary. Then I'm going to compare this number and say, am I within my upper or lower boundary, or am I outside of it? So if I actually run this as a line chart, it's a little easier to see. So here is my data, right? My line of my data. Now, this cloud, that's light blue cloud you see behind it, is my upper and lower boundaries based on my standard deviations. And then if I am outside of that boundary, I have a red triangle. So let's assume for a second, this is your quality assurance. And I'm looking at my number of defects. And I've got a certain range of error here, which is my standard deviation. And I can see if I'm generating any quality defects here and basically go to town. Now, I've talked about what threshold is. Excuse me. Let me undo that. Actually, I can't. Just give me a second here. Talked about threshold. I talked about window. Let's talk about consecutive and direction. Let's take direction first. Again, if this is a quality issue, quality assurance issue, if I'm above my mean or average, then I'm probably worried. If I'm below my mean or average, I don't care. So if I want to get rid of all the minus stuff, all the stuff below, I can get rid of that minus, and therefore I won't show anything below. Or I can get rid of the plus, right? And just show the stuff below. So you can add plus or minus to see which direction of errors you want to see. Now, I'm also going to adjust this just a little bit to bring it down to a threshold of 2. That should generate more outliers, more issues. And there's a reason why I want to do that. This consecutive value, if the consecutive value is equal to 1, if I have a value that's outside of my upper or lower boundary, I flag it as an outlier. If I change my consecutive value, say to 2, now I need 2 points outside of that line before I actually register a defect or an outlier. So here, as I look, I had a value that's here. There's the first time it occurred. Then there's the second time it occurred. That shows up as an outlier. It may be easier to see this as numbers. So if I go back and click on this as a number, and I scroll down here, here I had a value of 26. That's above my 23. So that's outside of my range, but I need 2 of these in a row. My next one was in range, so I reset. As I go on to the next page, again, I have a couple of these that just one instance, one occurrence, no fuss, no muss. Next page. Next page, eventually I'll find it. Should be in here somewhere. Here it is. So here I had a value of 9, which was below my low value. And then my next value was 14, which was below my low value. I now had 2 of these in a row. I now mark it as an outlier. Okay. And so that's our outlier function. And again, it comes with these standard 4 arguments: window, consecutive, threshold, and direction that you can control.
And direction pretty much is whether or not you get the positive or negative outlier.
Right, whether you display the positive, negative
Yeah.
outlier.
Without that, they'll never show up, regardless of what anything else is.
Mhm.
Okay.
That is correct. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to go ahead and close all the other tabs except for this tab, because I'm going to use this tab in another exercise in just a minute. That's my outlier. In lab 11, we can use the predict operator. And again, you can open up the documentation here on predict, and you can see basically what's going on. But here, if I go into this query, and if I paste in my predict operator, and I want to run it for probably about 3 hours, what my predict operator does is it takes my error count And then it calculates, it actually, predictive operator comes in two flavors. It uses linear regression or it uses aggregate regression. So actually, let me take a moment and look at my documentation here. So it actually uses either auto regression or linear regression. We're using, the example we're using is linear regression. So based on how you use the command, it'll parse it, figure out whether you're using AR or you're using LR. In our case, we're using linear regression. So it's going to calculate a slope of a line that shows me how things are going. So this line is my prediction model. And so here's all my various data points, and it goes out and predicts what my values are going to be and how things are going. Now, good news, this line is fairly horizontal. So if I'm looking at my costs, it looks like my costs are fairly constant over time, which is good. If I'm looking at my sales, it's fairly constant over time. That may or may not be so good. So, but the point is, you can look at the slope of the line and kind of get an idea of how things are trending. And again, it's going to go out a couple more periods here for you. And as part of the arguments, you can specify the arguments to how far out to the future do you want to go, type thing in the predict operator. So again, all kinds of stuff in here. And that is the predict operator.
Quick question. Does it say anywhere what the slope is?
It does not, I believe. No, in fact, I don't recall it ever displaying the slope. So nope. I don't see it anywhere.
That would be good to have.
I agree. Feel free to write it up as an enhancement. Okay. Lab 12. Lab 12 is, we have a transaction operator. We have a transactionalized operator. We also have a whole bunch of new tracing type things for transactions that occur. So while this lab is nice and this function is nice, I'm not sure that there isn't perhaps a new, better solution for you. Because, for example, in our transactionalized, in our open telemetry type things, we can actually capture transactionalized data. But this is something that we had a long time ago. And of course, we still have it. Now I'm going to go back out here 24 hours. And what this query is going to do is it's going to look at a series of information about EcoMart where I'm doing transactions. And it's going to parse out the IP address. And based on the IP address, it's going to look to see if things are in the confirmation state, the order ship state, the cart state, the shipping information state, and the billing information state. And it's going to talk to me and give me a listing here of all the different from and to states that happen. So what this query is basically doing here is it's giving me over the last 24 hours from this state to this state what the count was, and this state to this state what the count was, this state to this state the count was. And more importantly, I can click on this sand key diagram and now I can see the flow of things. So for example, when my customers went to purchase things, they put, it looks like 44,870 things in their cart. And a lot of times, about 34,000 times, they actually took it out of the cart and put it back in. But then as far as from the cart, they went to the shipping information. And out of that shipping information, they looks like they took about 5,124 times. And then from here, it went from orders, shipping information to orders shipped, and when the numbers really fell off. And so the question is why? Why did it fall off? Well, we could look at the logs to see why customers aren't, maybe they don't like the shipping information costs, maybe their credit cards were declined, whatever. Maybe we need to add a few more states in here to see what's going on. But this allows us to see the states of a transaction and see basically how things progressed back and forth. Okay. We also have, and I'm not going to get into it right now, we also have the ability, and with our traces, to be able to look at a transaction and see the various aspects of that transaction and when it failed and how it failed and all that stuff. So this is the new solution to that transaction type function. And this we talk about in the AWS observability class, observability fundamentals class. Okay. So I just want you to be aware of that. So that's transaction. Again, nice to know. Lab 13, creating meaningful alerts. This is the last lab. So you guys get a chance to get your exams in. I apologize that this class has run long. You've had some good questions and I appreciate it. Derek, is there a question, sir?
No, I never lowered my hand. Sorry.
No, no worries. No worries. Let me help everybody out. Okay, looks like all hands are lowered. Make sure everybody can talk. A couple of you folks are disabled from talking. We got that fixed. Okay, so here in this alert, remember yesterday in the fundamentals class, I said that you can, I can, we can, and I'm going to go back to this outlier function, right? This outlier function, that we could create an alert on this. And so here with my 3 vertical dots, I said that if you want to create an alert, you can do a save as. And then you could schedule this to run every so often. I think I'm running this every 24 hours. So let's change this and run this every 24 hours. I'm sorry, schedule this to run every 24 hours. There we go. Daily, thank you. And so I can say, look, notify me when the search is complete, or I can say if a condition is met. Now, if I say if a condition is met, you'll notice here for my alert condition, I have operators and I have number of results. Well, what do we mean by number of results? Number of results are the number of records I get back, okay? And to tell you the truth, if I run this query and you're going to wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning to tell me we've got a problem, all right? I don't want to be notified when all of this data is good. I only want to be notified when there's a serious outlier. So we recommend, and this is really the purpose of this, we recommend at the end of this that you probably want to add a where clause. And what you want to do is we want to invoke this when our error count violation is greater than 0. So I'm going to change this to where error count violation. Did I spell that right? VIO. Leave it to me to make a typo. Is greater than 0. So now by adding this where clause in here, now I only see 1 record. This is when I have a problem. This is when I want to be notified. This is when I want to be woken up, okay? And so the point we're trying to make here in Lab 13, in order to create meaningful alerts, there are certain qualities they have to be, right? They have to be actionable. They have to be, accurate. They have to be, and if you look at this blog post, and it's a really good blog post, it's actually on our customer-facing site, some key principles here. And as such, we recommend to make this thing meaningful, add a where clause so that you're not getting, everything's working fine, everything's working fine, everything's working fine. No, I want to add a where clause. Now I got a problem. And then I can send that alert here. So you can send that alert here and then fire this thing off. And so again, I could go in here, do a save as, schedule this to run. How often do I want it to run? Probably as often as my query daily. And then I can say, you know what? I want you to run if the following condition is met. I want greater than 0. So if I've got any records back, then I want you to email me, or I want you to send a webhook into Slack, or I want you to say this is a lookup, or I want you to do something. And that's what we're trying to talk about. Now, another way that we recently have added is we also have the ability here to create an alert another way. And here under manage data in our main menu, under monitoring, there is here under add, I can add a new monitor, and I'm going to do this based on my log, and I'm going to paste this code in there, except I'm going to get rid of this last line, this where clause. I know that why. So when this query runs, I see here's my results. And so here, I can trigger this based on my return result count or my error count or whatever. And I can tell it, look, if I'm missing data within a certain period of time, I want to fire something off. So this will not only tell me when the problem occurs, this will also tell me when I've recovered from that problem. I can also specify I want to warn at a certain level. So if I want to warn when I get down to say 3, so anywhere from here down, I don't get notified, from here up, I do. And I want to recover at that same level, or I can change it, make the level different. And then critical, I want you, this is going to be considered critical if I get to 4, all right? And so then down here, you can specify, how do I want to communicate? Do I want to send an email? Do I want to notify you through Datadog? Do I want to notify you Slack? How do I want to communicate with you? Okay. And so, and then in here, you can also add additional text, additional values in here, different variables, all that stuff. And you decide that this message is going to be fired off when I'm missing data, when I have warnings, when I have recovery, who I want to send this to, what text I want to send this to. You can create these monitors. And when you create these monitors, I'm going to discard this, but when you create these monitors, you can come in here and you can see their state, whether they're in a normal state or they've been disabled or they're critical or they're warning, you'll be able to see their states. And again, you can go in here if you want to, and you can disable a state, disable a one, or export it or delete it or whatever you want to. So this is something we take more time in the admin class to go in more detail, but this is probably the way most people now want to create alerts. Something a little bit more reusable. Okay. Okay. Karen asked a really good question. Can you set this up for certain times during the day? For example, I don't care if the data decreases after 8 p.m. or before 8 a.m. It's a good question, Karen. I believe we could through the API. So the API, I could create this alert programmatically and filter it and only have it run between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. or sorry, between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Let me try it that way. So I do it with the API, I believe is the answer to your question. Good question. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. And what other questions have we? So ladies and gentlemen, and it's taken only about 45 minutes longer than I wanted to. I've got you all covered with the examples and all of that good stuff. That takes care of this course. What questions have you before I get into getting you ready for the exam? Ashish, you raised your hand, sir? Barosh, I'm sorry. Okay, it looks like you'll reload your hand. So,
Hey, John, I do have a question.
yes, sir.
Setting up the collectors and the extraction fields, are those all covered in the administration?
They are.
Course? Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Sorry, we got to save something for other classes. Yep. And again, if you don't have time to join us tomorrow, remember I showed you where those classes recordings and stuff are and those labs are. You can do this yourself. Okay. But obviously I'd prefer to see you all tomorrow and get a chance to learn more. Anyway, any other questions? Okay. Okay, Karen asked a question here. Can you define parse regex versus parse anchor? Yep. Parse anchor is going to allow you to go through the text, and it's looking for heavily formatted and structured text. It's got to be consistently formatted. And if it matches the structure of that text, it will then parse out that field. Okay. So parse anchor, the messages all have to be consistently formatted the same way. Parse regex, regular expression, is looking for a regular expression that matches. Could be anywhere in the message. The message could be separately, very differently formatted, but a parse regex is much more flexible. However, parse regex also takes a little bit longer to run, has a little bit of a performance implication. Now, Karen, you can also go out to and search parse regex and parse anchor, and we'll also tell you that in our documentation as well. So I hope, Karen, that answers your question, man.
And one clarification on that. So if your data all returns IP, say in the very first line of a report or of a message, then parse anchor will pull that IP without issue. But if your data has IP in the first here, in the middle here, and in the end here,
Yep.
then the regex is what's going to be able to tell it this is the type of string you're looking for. Pull that.
Correct. So as I mentioned, parse anchor only works if your messages are consistently formatted the same way. So if I have one source of logs, my Apache access logs, which are all structured the same way, parse anchor will work fine. But if I want to see my Apache access logs and my Apache error logs, which are structured totally differently, then parse regex is probably the way to go. You're absolutely correct. Any other questions? All right. So let's get to the exam, ladies and gentlemen. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go in here to your Sumo Logic training environment where you're logged in as training analyst with some crazy number. And I want you to click on here and I want you to sign out. Okay. I want you to log out. And the reason is I want to make sure you, with your first name and your last name, get credit for the exam, not this training analyst account. Believe me, they have passed this account time and time again. All right. They don't need any more credits for the exam. All right. So I want you to go into your company's environment and I want you to log in with your credentials. If you do not have a company account to use, you can sign up for a demo account. So here you can sign up for a free demo account and you can use that account. I'll put this URL in the chat box in case you need it. Now, but I do want you to log into your company's environment with your account so that when you log in, if you open up your navigation panel down here, you see your first name and you see your last name. So you get credit for the exam. Now, for those of you who were not with me yesterday, I want to do a preemptive exercise here. And the reason is that we are very security conscious. We don't want you to go from one environment in Sumo Logic to another environment in Sumo Logic without your blessing, without your permission, okay? So to get around that, because we are going to go from our Sumo Logic environment to our learning management system, from one environment to another, we need to make sure that you have permission, given us permission for that. And so I'm going to do a slight little exercise here that I did yesterday, and I'll do it again tomorrow for anybody who's new. But I want you to open up your navigation panel. Those of you who weren't with me yesterday, open up your navigation panel, click on help, click on community. And when you click on community, you may see a pop-up panel that appears that says something about verifying your email or has a button on it to verify your email. And if it does, that's great. You want to click on that button, verify your email. And within a minute or so, you should get an email from Sumo Logic. And on that email, in the body of that email, there'll be another button. And if you click on that other button, you will be able to now go into our LMS environment. You've given us permission to go from one environment to another. So now to get into the exam, I just did this as a preemptive. Now to get into our exam, you can go into your company's Sumo Logic environment, click on the Home tab. On the Home tab, click on Certification, and under Certification, click on Get Certified. If when you click on Get Certified, it takes you back to here, it doesn't take you to our LMS. Again, you got to go back to that help button, that community button, and that email and take care of that little problem. But if you do take care of that little problem, again, you should be able to go to Home, Certification, Get Certified. And then under Get Certified, you will see here a bunch of tiles for all of the various courses and certifications we have. Up here in the upper right-hand corner is your profile. And in your profile, this is where we keep track of all of your certification exams. However, there's one important thing. And I'll talk about that one important thing here in just a second. So if I, you, whatever, go in here and click on Search Mastery, the Search Mastery tile. Okay. Vera, I'll take care of that question in just a second. Just bear with me. Okay. Here under Search Mastery, here's my Search Mastery exam in English. Here's the Search Mastery exam in Japanese. Here's the Search Mastery exam in Spanish. But I'm going to go ahead and click on the English exam now. I'm going to do this. I don't necessarily want you to follow along with me just yet. Okay. First thing you're going to have to do is register. And as you can see, when I click on register, boom, I'm registered. That was quick. That was easy. I can click on start if I want to, or I can go down here and click on before you start. Tells me the exam has 30 questions. I've got 60 minutes to complete it. And open book, open notes. You can even ask the instructor questions. I will be here for the next hour to answer your questions. Okay. And then, of course, the different types of questions you have, and the passing score is 75%. Good. Now, when I click next, and again, I don't want you to follow along, just watch me with your eyes for a second. It's going to take me to the exam and make an exam ready for me. Now, in our exam, I think we've got like about 50 questions in the test bank. Of that, you're going to get 30 questions. So here's my 1 hour counter. I can either click start the assessment, or I can start scrolling down. But once I start seeing questions, my counter counts. All right. And so it asks a question like this: what are your best practices for field extraction rules? Click 2. Okay. Field extraction rules make it easier for users to recognize field by names, and it can even improve search performance. There you go. There's 1. Okay. And then field extraction rules improve search performance. Okay. What is a valid parsing operator you can use in a log search? Okay. Of these 4 choices, the only one that's valid is parse regex. We do not do a parse SQL. We do not do a parse DOM. So I've answered 2 of these questions. Now I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I am going to say I am done. Now, obviously, I'm going to fail. I only have to take 2 questions. But it tells me here what questions I got right. It tells me what questions I didn't get right. But here's the big thing. Here's the reason I'm doing this. When you take this exam and you cut a 75 or above and you pass, and I am very proud of you, don't forget to click the submit button. Because when you click the submit button, it's going to add it to your profile. If you don't click the submit button, the exam did not happen. It's not, you're not going to see your certificate. You're not going to see anything. You're going to have to do it all over again. Okay. And so that's the issue there. So any questions about this before I answer Vera's question? Now, Vera's question is, she logged in inadvertently as training analyst some number, and she took her exam and passed it. And she wants to get it transferred to her name. Okay, great question. Happens occasionally. And what we suggest you do, Vera, is you send an email to training@sumologic.com with a copy of that certificate. And please tell us that, you took that exam, and please put it to your work email and tell us what your work email is. And we can transfer this in our database to you. All right. But obviously, the reason I'm going through this long litany is so we can avoid this. You all log in on your company's environments with your names, take the exam. This problem won't happen much, but it does happen. And I understand that. So Vera, I hope that answers your question. Send an email to training@sumologic.com with a copy of your certificate, and tell us you want us to change it to, and then your work email or whatever you want us to change it to. And hopefully you have an account in our LMS. So hopefully that gets things taken care of. Thank you for asking. By the way, like I said, it happens at least once every class. So in fact, it actually happens probably about 6 times each class. So I'm not shocked by the question. I appreciate the question, and I want to try to head this stuff off at the pass. All right, let me say my goodbyes here. Let me turn my camera back on. And again, I want to thank you all for being with us today. I hope we see you all tomorrow for the admin class, if you're interested. Otherwise, and of course, next month when we offer some other classes as well. I am going to be quiet. I am going to stop the recording, and I am going to stop my sharing, let you guys take the exam. If you get stuck on anything, feel free to let me know. Okay. That's why I'm here. Okay. And again, we want to try to help you out. So if you get stuck on a question, ask. I will help you. Okay. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, please be safe, be fun. Oh, one other thing. The end of November, there is the AWS reInvent that's going to be out in Vegas. So actually having an event where people are getting together in Vegas. You got to have your vaccines. You're going to be wearing masks and all stuff. I will be there. I'll be in booth 166, be doing some demo classes. So if you guys are in the area and you happen to be in Vegas doing AWS reInvent, I'd love to see you. Otherwise, thanks a lot for attending. Again, take the exam. Good luck. I'll be here for you, but please be safe and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all.